On Tuesday, March 7th, I will call the Board of Health meeting to order. First on our agenda is Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation, and Commissioner Turnbull has requested to lead us in that. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's go to the Lord. Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful day and this great opportunity for us to have impact change in our local community. Please give us insight on all the areas that we will discuss. I pray that if there's discord or disagreement, that you open our ears and our minds to what is said, and that we best represent the people that we were sent here to represent, Lord. Please help us to make sound decisions and positive action on all the areas. And we thank you for everything you do. Please guide us in all your ways. In the Lord's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Do we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Chamberlain,
Here.
Commissioner Gino,
Here.
Commissioner Chamberlain,
Here again.
Commissioner Leanne, here, Commissioner Mapes,
Here.
Commissioner Mason,
Here.
Commissioner Rubin,
Here.
Commissioner Turnbull.
Present. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have review and approval of the meeting minutes from February 7, 2023. I did notice that we have the call to order, and maybe right underneath there, we should put Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. Other than that, I didn't notice anything. Does anyone else have any corrections? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended. I'll second. Van is my first and Mapes is second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Review and approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as printed. So support. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Public comment. We do have a sign-up sheet, but anyone who wishes to address the board will be given 3 minutes. It is on our website. The rules, Robert's rules of public comment. I will start on this list, and anyone else who desires to address the board will be given time. So the first name I have is M. Lieberman. No. Okay. Second, Elaine Miller. Okay.
Luann McKinney and IPS for now.
Okay, thank you. Yep, there will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of our meeting.
Thank you.
Yep. Jeff. Sorry, I'm not good at pronouncing last names. Hardtech. Next, I have John Swartout. Commissioner Chamberlain is keeping a timer just to keep order. If you get near 3 minutes, you'll probably see him wave his hand, and we ask that you conclude your comments at that time. Okay, thank you.
Who's the secretary?
Miss Osmond, she's right over there.
SWARTOUT. My name is John Swarnout. I recently retired from a 35-year career on the Great Lakes. I graduated from the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in 1987, spent 10 years working my way up from third mate to captain on lake freighters, followed by 25 years as a United States registered pilot serving ocean ships when they come to the Great Lakes. So why should you hear what I have to say about public health? Because I know enough about public service and I know enough about shipwrecks that I believe I can help you succeed in your mission. Let me explain. As a pilot, my job was to navigate and maneuver large ships around the lakes, into and out of port, up and down the rivers, and through the sea locks. Pilotage was compulsory for any commercial vessel registered outside the United States and Canada moving anywhere on the Great Lakes. That means my allegiance as a pilot was to the public, not just to the ships that I was assigned to. As stated by Clay Diamond, Executive Director and General Counsel of the American Pilots Association, a compulsory pilotage requirement is by far the most effective mechanism available to the Coast Guard to protect the critically important waters of the Great Lakes, ensure the safety of the region's people and marine environment, and facilitate safe waterborne commerce. It is effective because it places on the bridge of a ship an individual whose sole purpose in being there is to protect the public interest. As a professional mariner, I've had a fair amount of training in accident prevention. Researchers have found that the vast majority of marine casualties don't occur because one person makes one mistake. Rather, they are usually the culmination of a series of errors, often by more than one decision maker. Quoting Dr. Anita M. Rothblum of the United States Coast Guard Research and Development Center, a Dutch study of 100 marine casualties found that the number of causes per accident ranged from 7 to 58, with a median of 23. In 93 of the 100 incidents, multiple human errors were made, usually by 2 or more people, each of whom made about 2 errors apiece. But here's the most important point. Every human error that was made was determined to be a necessary condition for the accident to occur, unquote. What that means is that there are typically many opportunities to, shall we say, alter course before an accident happens and interrupt the chain of errors before it results in disaster. So what does that have to do with public health? Well, there are some striking similarities between the practice of seamanship and the practice of medicine. And I'll begin to tell you about them next time we meet. We're just getting started. To be continued. Thank you.
Martha Lancaster.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for the work you do for public health in our community. My name is Martha Lancaster, and I've lived in Emmett County for about 40 years. I have a master's degree from the University of Michigan School of Public Health, and I worked in Health and Human Service Administration for many years. During my working life, I often worked in association with the health department programs and staff, and I have a good understanding of the complex work that's done here. Since I retired, I have volunteered with several programs conducted by our health department. During all this time, I've been tremendously impressed with the quality and breadth of services provided by this health department. When I speak with colleagues in other parts of the state, they're often surprised when I tell them about the many services our health department provides. Over the years, I've often remarked that I think we may have the best health department in Michigan, certainly one in a rural area. The Health Department of Northwest Michigan is known for its highly competent and professional staff. It has been very successful in creating and sustaining services that meet a broad range of health needs, far beyond the minimal mandated services. By collaborating with other agencies, such as community mental health, the ISD, individual schools, substance abuse agencies, hospitals, and law enforcement, as well as private nonprofits, such as the Women's Resource Center, this health department has provided regional expertise on a wide range of health needs. This creativity and initiative has enabled them to best address the varied health needs in this community. Moreover, health department staff have been creative and successful in bringing in federal, state, and private funding to help sustain these services. Please don't limit staff's availability to do this. I understand that some of you have questioned why this health department should do any more than basic mandated services. I understand that some of you have questioned why additional funding should be sought to support them. This is an amazing and complex agency. I urge you not to make cuts or changes without fully understanding the complexity both of our community's health needs and this great agency that works to meet those needs. Please take some time and be mindful of any changes you're contemplating. And yes, I am using that term ironically, but mindful is a very great term. Don't jump into things based on rumors or incomplete understanding. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide input and for your service on this board.
Phyllis Ledger. Murray Dean Bentis. Stephanie Jacobson,
Oh, that's probably Marcy.
Marcy. Okay.
Marcy Bushane at Seagull County. And don't worry, everybody butchers it. When I order pizza, I order under my maiden name Hall. It's very easy. I just wanted to comment on the Camp Grayling expansion. When I was here last month, I commented a little bit. And I see that you guys put it on the agenda, and I thank you for that. In my own opinion, Camp Grayling has enough space, okay? So I think it's like 240 something square miles. You'll hear more a little bit later. But what I commented to last time, and what I still maintain, is I've lived in several places that the water's been contaminated. Thankfully, I don't live in Camp Grayling around Lake Marguerite, because I'd be living in another one of those contaminated areas. So I hope that you will listen to what Mr. Montevolis has to say about what Camp Grayling so far has not remediated as far as exposure to PFAS. I hope you'll listen to the environmental challenges that come with this expansion. So that being said, that's all I have on that. I do notice that there's another motion on the table, and if I recall correctly, that is a motion to have this board be part of the grant process as far as, you know, just being aware, having it come before you so that you know what's going on, more transparency of what's happening within the health department. I applaud you for that as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking that extra little step. I do understand that there's time constraints on some of these grants that they propose, but there's got to be something to keep you guys in the loop and at least have you guys have the knowledge of what's happening around you. Thank you.
Stephanie Jacobson.
Stephanie Jacobson, I'm from Seagull County. Yeah, just to piggyback off what Marcy said, I'm very pleased that this board is taking a proactive approach to looking at a lot of the environmental concerns surrounding the Camp Grayling expansion. I do think there's a lot of things over the years that the government has not remediated and not done well regarding our environment. And I think that is perfectly appropriate place for a health board to weigh in on. So I appreciate the consideration there. I too am in support of anytime my elected officials can have oversight over a bureaucracy. And as you recall, last time I told a little story about my time in clinical nutrition and how we really weren't following the science even back then by promoting the food guide pyramid over the Mediterranean diet for health concerns, and I could never figure out why until I looked at a lot of the driving force behind that, which was the money involved. And I'm going to tell you another little story. It may shock some of you due to my limited government activities that I actually did work for the health department of Northwest Michigan, or not Northwest Michigan, I worked for District 4 Health Department. And it was a very good experience. I met a lot of wonderful people, but it kind of helped shape the person I am today. When I left the health department, I was their dietitian. I had worked there over probably about a year and a half, and I left to stay home with children. And the last day of work, I was, well, these are two different stories. Sorry, let me back that up. I'll tell you a different one. I was the clinical dietitian, and one day they informed me I was going to Alpena for a meeting on a simulated disaster. Now, the dietitian had no business being there and nothing to offer, no experience in a disaster situation. But I was paid to drive over to Alpena and sit at this meeting for 8 hours. During the meeting, and it was a big thing. They were going to crash a SARS plane at the Alpena airport. They had crisis actors being sick people. They had, counties from all over doing all kinds of crazy stuff with their emergency services. And there came talk about kits, some kind of blood kit or test kit or whatever they needed for the simulation. And the nurses that I worked with, to their credit, said, hey, we've got a bunch of those kits in the closet and they're actually expired. And we can use those kits for this simulation because we can't do anything else with them. And, it's not a true disaster, so it seems perfectly fine. And the gentleman in charge of the meeting said, nope, we got $100,000 to buy new kits, and we're gonna buy new kits and use them for this disaster. And it was probably one of those aha moments that made me the hated person I am today. No one spends their own money as carefully, or no one spends someone else's money as carefully as we spend our own. And so I appreciate the fact that we look in those grants. As a parent, I think it's necessary given what's going on in our schools. So thank you.
Nanny Porter. Henry Mason, did you want to speak in public comment?
I'm going to defer.
Okay. Henry, did you want to speak in public comment?
We have amended the motion, and Dan Burrell has, that's a different motion. I'm sorry. But we have amendments to our motion, which I think are positive for everyone. At this point, have you got the amendment in place?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to speak to the amendment at this point, Mr. Chairman, or
I think we'll just bring it up under that point on the agenda.
during the motion?
Yes.
itself? Yes.
Commissioner, just to clarify, that's Henry Mason over there. That's who signed up
Oh,
for
okay.
public comment.
There's two of them.
I'm sorry, there's two of them. I just assumed that the Henry Mason on here was the other Mr. Mason. Would you like to speak?
No, I'll defer.
Okay. Sorry about that. Larry Dyer.
Morning, I'm Barry Dyer, Lawrence Dyer from Petoskey, so the president of Emmett County. I'd just like to comment on the table motion that grants would be approved by the program committee. Just like to offer my perspective as someone that's worked for a long time in the nonprofit sector and Michigan State University Extension. So I've had a lot of experience writing grants. A lot of the work I've done has been dependent on grants. And I know the grants are a lot of work, a lot of significant investment of staff time. They're also important in bringing resources into the community that enables the staff to expand the work that they're able to do. And I also know that the grants often operate on tight deadlines. My concern is that many of the grants that staff at the health department will be pursuing, some of those federal grants can have a deadline of less than 2 months. Adding the other step of bringing it to this body to be approved could challenge their ability to meet some of those grant deadlines. Alternatively, they could begin to just develop the grant, invest all that staff time, only to have it shot down by this committee, and that would be an ineffective and wasteful use of staff time. I personally think that you might also find that to adequately inform yourselves about the content of grants and the subject matter and what's entailed would be a significant investment of your time. And I think you'd be ill-advised to to try to micromanage staff at that level. You hire staff, trusting that they have the competence, the skills, the knowledge, the experience, and the good judgment to fulfill their employment. And I think micromanaging for many of those employees, part of their employment, part of their job is to write grants, to bring more resources into their work. And I think it'd be ill-advised to micromanage them at that level. If you want to have more oversight, my suggestion would be to actually draft guidelines that would more clearly state what your parameters and expectations are for grants that can be granted. I think the process of further educating yourselves on what grants are pursued and why, and what those can do, and getting feedback from staff, making that available to the public for comment to help clarify. One, create a document that the employees of the health department could be confident that they're operating within the parameters and expectations of this board, and I think would also help clarify your own expectations and understanding the process. Thank you for hearing my concerns.
Sarah, Laurel, Wardell.
All right. Morning. My name is Sarah Ward. Thank you for this opportunity. I've been in community philanthropy or grant making for 15 years in both Emmett and Charlevoix counties. The Health Department of Northwest Michigan has been a best-in-class partner for us as local community grant makers. They have made resources come to our communities through their success in grant writing, and we've been able to add a little bit, right? We don't have the resources that larger grant makers do, but those services have been very important for our public. Dental health care to seniors, caring for pregnant women, behavioral health care, and school nurses in public schools, and the health department brought all of those to our community. So I'd like to voice my support for our health department and the services that they make available for our community and the public in general. I wanted to just let you know that today, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the last name on the list, but anyone else who would like to address the board will be given 3 minutes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, please.
I'm Mary Moore. I'm a taxpayer in Emmett County. I have a child in high school in Emmett County. I'd just like to take my couple of minutes here to urge you all to vote yes on Mr. Rubin's motion, which formalizes the Board of Health review and approval of grant applications before they are submitted. The motion is not complicated, nor is it something I believe to be feared. Okay? It formalizes the very thing which is oversight, which is why you guys were elected. It's what you were elected to do. Just a few points I kind of feel it's going to give you the sort of 8 things I'm thinking about. Number one, it's entirely appropriate for you to exercise oversight in this way. It is your job, it is your fiduciary responsibility, and you should have a process for this kind of oversight, in my humble opinion. Number two, it is a concrete step that you can take right now to avoid future problems and future time-consuming surprises and exercises like the mindfulness discussion that was acrimonious in some ways and that was had here in December. Number three, voting yes on this motion is not a vote to cut any specific programs. I repeat, you're not cutting programs today by voting yes. Rather, you're voting to establish a process to review the grant programming in a more organized, formal, and timely way. That is before the health department is committed to doing whatever the grant is for. Number four, there are ample meetings by this board and by committees of this board throughout any given month where grants can be discussed. It seems to me that deadlines can be met through mutual cooperation. And I think that Mr. Thoreau and your new CFO are very reasonable, intelligent people that have shown every indication that they're interested in cooperating. I think that this process works routinely in many county governments and also in the private sector. It's something that ought to be tried. Number 5, if there is truly no workable solution after a few months of trying, you can always come back to the board and change things around again. But it makes no sense to me, nor to a lot of your constituents, to not try at this point. Number 6, you're frankly a conservative board. You were elected because after the COVID debacle, voters don't completely trust the so-called experts to make common sense decisions. They do want common sense oversight from all of you, and they believe that you can deliver it. Number 7, if you don't exercise your oversight in this way, then your meetings may as well be like the January meeting where you simply rubber stamp or approve the financial expenditures that come your way. Really, that's not your job. You're not a rubber stamp. You're supposed to have oversight. Last but not least, you may not be popular in this room today for voting yes. I'm not quite sure, but if so, that might be because the health department itself is overly represented here, and they have an understandable fear, like we all do, of the unknown. Outside of this room, however, I believe that your constituents will thank you for doing what they elected you to do. Thanks for your time.
Other public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Hello. My name is Kim Gildery. I live in Boyne City, and I have a master's in public health, and I work currently at the County Health Rankings and I became aware of the controversy about oversight recently, and so I took a few minutes and I looked at the 2022 Community Health Needs Assessment, which showed that in the Northwest region in Michigan, mental health and substance use disorders are number 2 in concern. That the indicators that were worse than the region or the state are include % of special education children, child abuse and neglect, teens with adverse childhood experiences, and teens with major depressive episodes. More than half the physician providers interviewed for this region in the community health needs assessment think that mental health services are missing and would benefit their patients. And I took a few moments and looked up the peer-reviewed scientific literature on mindfulness and found that in a meta-analysis that there was a treatment effect that would enable it to be called a promising practice, that there was strong and consistent evidence of favorable emotional and cognitive reaction to stress among children, and that there are many benefits, attention benefits, emotional self-regulation, working memory, academic benefits, social skills, and national evaluation showed that that this was a beneficial practice in schools. There was no mention of Buddhism. So it seems to me that the Health Department of Northwest Michigan is doing what the Community Health Needs Assessment is asking for. They are doing evidence-based practice. They seem to be like they're doing their job. And I believe that you should vote no on the motion because they seem to have kind of they're using the science and they're using community opinion to serve our children.
Thank you. Other public comment? Going once? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Christine Gebhardt. I'm from Emmett County, and I'm the retired Chief Executive Officer for North Country Community Mental Health. Having served in that position for 5 years and with the organization for 25 years, covering all 4 of the counties that you represent. I'm here really to listen, and a lot of the comments that have been made this morning I have to echo. And that is, as someone who has worked collaboratively in my capacity with the Health Department of Northwest Michigan, which is an exceptional institution, highly respected, has brought incredible funding into this region to support the needs of our communities. I can tell you that being an effective grant writer and recipient is extremely difficult. And this organization and our department has been exemplary in that. These grants are very time sensitive. And while it's important for the board to be informed and knowledgeable, to delay the process of applying for and receiving those grant funds would be very detrimental to the people that we serve. I encourage you to think twice about micromanaging the leaders that you hire to lead the organization, to set the mission, to set the goals and the strategic initiatives. And I would hope that that would be enough for you to trust in the work that these individuals do.
Other public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment at this time. There will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of our meeting. Item number 8, consideration of Camp Grayling expansion resolution. Commissioner Turner.
Mr. Chairman, I believe everybody in this room is aware of the Camp Grayling expansion. We've had multiple individuals speak on it. In particular, Mrs. O'Shane from Otsego County has asked us to take a look at it and how it's detrimental to the environment, which I believe is one of the pillars of the health department as protection of the environment. So working with her, I spoke with a few individuals, one of the individuals here, Mr. Montepolis, and the commission. I would like to give him a couple of minutes to speak on the issue to better inform everybody. But I think it is pretty apparent that the Camp Grayling expansion, that they have what they already have what that is needed for their training, but they're not appropriately using it, whether in the environmental catastrophes or what is going on with the environment, they're not properly overseeing. So why do they need to have, doubled in size from their they currently have? Just a simple note, I heard a Camp Grayling commander, he spoke and said that as far as training is concerned, because they want all this extra land for training, and so they put the onus on our military members, our soldiers, which I, as a retired soldier, I abstain because I don't want to be used, and I don't want anybody to use our military as pawns in a game for something like this. But the reason what they're saying is they need this land for better training. But I also heard from the same individual, this is Colonel Scott Myers, that at any given time, 50 to 70% of the current Camp Grayling land goes unused in training. So if they're not using the lower number, 50% of the current land, why do they need more land for training? That's in my opinion. So I worked with an attorney, and they were able to provide us with a resolution very similar to the one that the Board of Commissioners passed unanimously for Otsego County, with Kalkaska did as well, and Crawford County. So I just asked that everybody take a look at it and see it as an opportunity. We have an opportunity to protect not only the land of pure Michigan, we also have the opportunity to protect our constituents, our people that we represent. So with your permission, I would like to ask if Mr. Montepolis would be able to speak for a few minutes.
Yes, Monty, if you would come to the podium here and maybe just a 2-minute overview, and then see if there's any questions from the commissioners. I feel that would be the most helpful at this time. And maybe just like you did at the Yankton County meeting, just a brief picture of your background.
Sure.
You can move up just a little bit so people that are zooming in will be able to see.
Thank you.
Board of Health Committee members and other esteemed leaders in Northern Michigan and residents, I'm here today to talk to you about the proposed expansion of Camp Grayling. I have this much information that I'm going to try to compile into this much time. I'm here today to tell you the facts about Camp Grayling that are not being portrayed in the newspaper. I think it's important that you have all the information to you to be able to make an informed decision. For the last 9 months, myself and a few other gentlemen, one of which notably is the former deputy commander of Camp Grayling. There's also a combat veteran and a retired lieutenant colonel. We've been going around sharing the following information about Camp Grayling. I want to say to you that we belong to a citizens action group that we started 9 months ago with 6 of us. Now we're above 7,000 members. We strongly support our military. We believe the military should have the opportunity to receive all the training that they need, the most modern forms of training. But we oppose the expansion, and here's why. As it presently sits right now, Camp Grayling is the largest National Guard training facility in America, bar none. And to put things in perspective, because it's not just enough to say that it's the largest, it is overwhelmingly the largest. In most cases by tens of thousands of acres, and in a lot of cases by 100,000 acres or more. So to say that it's the largest really doesn't accurately reflect just how large Camp Grayling is. We were told by the commander of Camp Grayling that they needed additional land to engage in modern forms of training. A whole bunch of research that I won't bore you with has led me to this conclusion that I want to share with you. In each of the contiguous United States, every National Guard has its own training area. Every one of those National Guards provides to their soldiers state-of-the-art training and gives them the superior training that they need so that they can become combat ready. And every single one of those National Guards in each of the other states are doing so on tens of thousands of less acres. So it's misleading for the colonel to go around and tell the public that they need additional land and able to best prepare our guardsmen and guardswomen. So I want to give you just a really quick example about that. According to Camp Grayling's website, in a typical year, they train between 10 and 15,000 guardsmen, and they do so on 148,000 acres. According to the National Guard itself, there's a National Guard in central Pennsylvania. It's called Fort Indiantown Gap. According to the National Guard itself, for 5 of the last 7 consecutive years, Fort Indiantown Gap has been recognized by the military as being the busiest, most productive National Guard training area in America. In a typical year, it trains in excess of 110,000 guardsmen and guardswomen. They do it on 18,000 acres. On 18,000 acres. As Commissioner Turnbull said, Camp Grayling has 148,000 acres available to it presently. In layman's terms, that's 230 square miles. We know for a fact, because the campus told us itself, as Commissioner Turnbull said, between 50 and 70% of the land currently available to them is not used in a typical year. So 50% of 148,000 acres is 74,000 acres. They have 74,000 acres in a typical year that they don't use for training, but yet they're asking for an additional 162,000 acres. Camp Grayling wants to go from 148,000 acres to 310,000 acres. And again, in layman's terms, they want to go from 230 square miles to almost 500 square miles, right smack in the middle of the heart of the northern Lower Peninsula. This is why this is important to you. Every 7 or 10 years, Camp Grayling comes to the public and wants to acquire more of our state land. And for the last couple of times that they've done this, we were able to defeat their proposal. So although they're not asking for land in any of your 4 counties, although they are infringing a little bit into Antrim County, and Otsego too,
Otsego.
Otsego as well. That's not to say that 10 years from now, when they try this again to acquire more state land, that they could be beating on your doors too. So I'm here today to ask the Board of Health to consider joining 44 other local Northern Michigan communities represented by more than 200 elected leaders. When I say 44, we have Otsego County, Crawford County, Roscommon County, Kalkaska County. Recently, Sheboygan County joined us, even though they're not part of the proposed expansion area. We believe that this is a Northern Michigan issue. Again, we want our guardsmen to have the best training possible. The issue is whether or not they have more than enough land presently to train in. And the evidence, this is not an opinion, the evidence suggests that they do. So that speaks to the issue of whether or not the ask by Camp Grayling is justified in terms of do they have enough space. What I also want to share with you is I took the time yesterday to send to all of the committee members a link to an original letter that was written by a gentleman named Randall Roth. Randall Roth works for the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. For the last, going back to 2016, so for the last 7 years, he's made himself specifically familiar with how Camp Grayling has dealt with the issue of PFAS being spilled into Lake Marguerite and the iconic Sabo River and Manistee Rivers and into our groundwater aquifers. I'll let you read, the gentleman's name is Randall Roth. He works for the Department of Eagle. He's a district supervisor with Eagle. If you'll spend time Googling him, you'll find a link to his 11-page letter that he wrote to Camp Grayling. In that letter, he admonishes Camp Grayling as being grossly inadequate in investigating, mediating, and remediating the PFAS contamination issue. Randall Roth did something extraordinary, extraordinarily courageous. And really he did this because he's probably close enough to retirement where it's not going to affect him. But he went on the record publicly from one Michigan environmental agency to another. From the Department of Eagle, he publicly recommended to the DNR not to move forward or approve the request of Camp Grayling to more than double in size because of its grossly inadequate handling of this PFAS issue. This PFAS issue, although it's centered down in the Grayling area, it affects all of us. If you care about Lake Michigan, if you care about Lake Huron, then you should care about this issue because the Asabo and the Manistee eventually make their way to both Great Lakes. This is the Great Lakes state. And I want to share one other really important piece of information. One of the forms of training they want to engage in is called electromagnetic warfare training. Okay? If you Google the subject of electromagnetic warfare, there are dozens of university articles that tell how dangerous electromagnetic warfare training is to the environment. It affects everything from insects to fish to animals, of course, to human beings. As humans, we tend to think on a large scale. All we need to do is wipe out the insect population, and there go our fish. And when our fish go bye-bye, then our wildlife goes bye-bye. The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, to this moment in time, has fish consumption guidelines issued for both the Manistee River and the Asabo River. And you would be shocked to learn how little fish, trout, that you can eat in a month and consider and still be below the thresholds of it being dangerous for you. The same Department of Health has out on state land erected signs that say, do not consume the venison taken from this area. If you can imagine that. So this issue is not unique to Camp Grayling. Anywhere around the United States, anywhere there's a military base or a training area, 90% of them have contaminated the base and the communities around them. So and they don't do it on purpose. It's just a function of the military training. But therein lies my point. If Camp Grayling already has 148,000 acres available to it, and it's not using 74,000 acres, why would we give them the opportunity to expand to 500 square miles, from 230 square miles to 500 square miles, when we have an opportunity to contain that risk? We do not begrudge Camp Grayling the land that they have. We've demonstrated our patriotism to Camp Grayling for more than a century by donating more of our state land than any other state has donated to its respective National Guard. What I'm asking you here today, to please consider joining 44 other local governments and dozens of sportsman groups and environmental groups that support our military but oppose the expansion of Camp Grayling. And I'm here to ask you today to consider voting to oppose the expansion of Camp Grayling, and then writing a resolution and passing that resolution on to the DNR director, Shannon Latt, and to the governor of Michigan herself. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. That's as concise as I could make this presentation, but thank you.
Questions for Monty? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think anybody's in favor of what you just spoke on, but there's a process. And since our last meeting in Antrim County, we were advised that this whole process of public comment was done February 8th. So what are you advising in the process? If they shut the public comment down and they're going to here's what we've been told. The public comment period closed on February 8th. Once there is a refined plan from the DNR, will be reopened again. So should we wait and see what they plan on doing to reopen? Should we just say, we don't care what you think, here's our other plan? What's the process?
Well, the process has been that they originally, Camp Grayling, when they sprung this on citizens, they were going to give Michigan 1 month to ask questions about this. And then we rose up and formed a citizens action group, which is now more than 7,000 members. And because of that, they extended the initial comment period. They said until the initial decision was going to be made. There's going to be 2 decisions made, hopefully just one. With the first decision, the initial decision, they're either going to reject the plan in its entirety or move all of it or some of it forward for like a higher level of evaluation. We feel like our best opportunity to defeat this is to have them rejected initially. Our concern is that if they spend the next year evaluating it and spend millions of dollars of DNR money taken away from wildlife management into evaluating this process, that they're going to end up awarding something to Camp Grayling. So we're hoping to defeat this with the initial decision. To answer your question though, the comment period was closed down on February 8th to citizens, but it was not closed down, and this is what I want to clarify. It's not closed down to elected and appointed public officials. So counties, townships, road commissions, boards of health still have an opportunity to stand up for their constituents and residents and make their voices heard. And we feel strongly that if you will add your voice to the voice of thousands, that we will have a chance to defeat this. So you still have an opportunity.
Was there a deadline for us for elected?
Well, we're told that a decision could come literally any day now. We were told a week and a half ago that the decision would be made in a couple of weeks, but we've heard that same thing several times. We tend to believe because they closed down the comment period that the decision is coming very quickly. So, and not to rush the Board of Commissioners, but time is of the essence. And that's why I'm respectfully urging you to consider voting on this today passing a resolution today and sending a PDF copy of that resolution to the DNR director and to Governor Whitmer saying, hey, we don't want this here in Northern Michigan.
Any other questions? Mr. Turnbull, I think you made it clear to me that you would like to make the motion.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we sign the resolution in opposition to the Camp Graham expansion.
There's support for that? I'll support. Thank you. We have a motion, we have a resolution in front of us. Our health officer, Mr. Terrell, has looked it over. He's added a paragraph about PFAS on it. Other questions, discussion before we take a vote?
Take a look at the resolution. I haven't seen it.
Okay, it was emailed to you, but would you like me to read it?
Yes.
Okay, I will read it. Health Department of Northwest Michigan. Resolution to oppose the proposed Camp Grayling expansion. This resolution is based on the following facts and circumstances. Our mission is to serve our entire community and to achieve health equity by promoting well-being, preventing disease, and protecting the environment through partnerships, innovation, and excellence in public health practice. Our community includes Charlevoix, Emmett, Antrim, and Otsego counties. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources is considered a request by Camp Grayling to expand the lands they use for military training and testing from 230 square miles to 480 square miles. A portion of this proposed expansion will include areas within Otsego County and has the potential to affect our entire community. We and our community have and do support our military and understand the need for training. We are concerned that this proposal is both unnecessary and poses health risks to our community and the environment we are charged with protecting, including 1, the potential for the electromagnetic warfare to have unknown risks, such as the military's unintentional contamination with PFAS. 2, the potential for adverse mental health implications when the training and testing areas expand into areas that are residential or historically used by Michigan citizens for recreation. 3, increased activities and traffic associated with the proposed expansion of Camp Grayling will create significant adverse impacts on noise levels and generally threaten the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of our community. In addition, Camp Grayling has not taken timely action to investigate, mitigate, and remediate PFAS contamination that already exists. The lack of action to address the current PFAS issues that affect communities surrounding Camp Grayling does not instill confidence regarding stewardship of the land and natural resources in the proposed expansion area. We believe the proposed Camp Grayling expansion is inconsistent with the DNR's mission, which is we are committed to the conservation, protection, management, use, and enjoyment of the state's natural and cultural resources for current and future generations. And its vision, which is we strive to be a nationally recognized leader in protecting natural and cultural resources, ensuring sustainable recreation use and enjoyment, enabling strong natural resource-based economies, improving and building strong relationships and partnerships, and fostering effective business practices and good governance. For all these reasons, we oppose the proposed expansion, and by copy of this resolution to the Director of the DNR and Governor Gretchen Whitmer, we ask that they reject this proposal.
Can I ask if any other health department?
Actually, I asked Kevin Hughes, the health officer from District 10, because they have contained Crawford County, and their Board of Health has not taken it up. I don't know if you talked to them or.
We haven't, there's just so much time, so we focused on the government units specifically and the expansion area. And then now we're talking to Board of Health and things like that. But previously it was county commissioners, township commissioners, road commissioners. So we're just now getting to the board.
So is there truly a PFAS?
Oh, well, Camp Grayling has had a PFAS problem, existing PFAS problem associated with its airport or military airspace, not airspace.
Firefighting.
From firefighting foam use, and yeah, there's quite a bit of contamination. And the gentleman that that he mentioned, Randy Roth. I've actually worked with him for many years and have a lot of respect for him. And he did come out, basically and said that they do not support this expansion because they literally have not taken care of the problems that they've created already. And that, I'm concerned about that as well. I talked to Randy about this issue. Range 40 is on the northern, that's the part that goes into Otsego County.
Yes.
And there is actually concern there. It's an area of interest for PFAS contamination that has not been fully investigated, even though Eagle has been, telling them, we need to investigate this, you need to put some money into this. And this summer, there are plans to do vertical aquifer sampling on the west side of Range 40, which the groundwater is flowing in that direction towards Guthrie Lake, which is in Otsego County. There is a portion that's not in Otsego County, but the majority of it's in Otsego County. And there's quite a few private wells that are around that lake. So, I definitely have concerns about PFAS contamination in that area too. So, yeah, and another point to make too is that by the National Guard basically dragging their feet on a lot of this work that needs to be done regarding PFAS, the state has had to spend millions of dollars because they're not going to sit there and wait, right? Things need to get done. And so we've spent millions of dollars of our own taxpayers' money in Michigan to address this problem. So that's, also a concern.
They were saying, for instance, that Camp Grayling to date has only investigated 14 wells. The Department Eagle has said that they need to explore hundreds of wells. So Camp Grayling is actually charged with dismissing and minimizing the impact to the economy, because according to Camp Grayling, in the 14 wells that they've checked, the issue is not that bad, but according to Eagle, there's hundreds of wells that need to be investigated.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that's just the product of me being around too long. There's an argument, the discussion's been held in Charlotte County, and there's an argument to be made that we don't have a dog in the fight, but that same argument was made 15 years ago when a party from Emmett County was trying to put a deep injection well down in the Alva region of Antrim County, and we actually got into that fight based on the realization that if anything were to happen, that those headwaters of the Short River would have flown into Charlotte County, and we would have left to deal with the results of that. The example that was used at that time, and I think it holds true now, would be that they've demonstrated that they've had a use of the public land, and through probably no intention of theirs, they've damaged that land and have yet to remediate it or make an attempt to remediate it. And now they come and ask for an expansion of that land, and yet what you have is a historical demonstration on how they've treated it. So through the opposition that was planted during the injection well process that went down, those individuals that were working in that project ended up coming up with a remediation program, not only to benefit the use or the transportation of I won't say infected, but of the waters that were tainted. But they resolved that issue. They resolved an issue but it was a result of that rejection of that plan that made them go back and say, okay, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to take care of this? And they ended up, taking care of the problem. So it had mutual benefits to the community in that it wasn't brought down to Antrim County. In addition to, they found a way to correct it themselves. So even though that argument could be made that we don't have a dog in the fight, I would encourage a consideration that based on the knowledge that you have and the way that the land's been treated, or in this particular case, not treated, that there's a history here to build from to say, listen, I can't support a future expansion if this is how you're going to treat the land you've already given. So that would be my opinion as one member of this board.
That's exactly what Randall Roth said in those words.
Well, correct. If it does get away from them and it goes out into other areas, then who's going to pay for that? Who's willing to correct that? Because they're going to look back on us. They're going to look back on the government and all those individuals to do that. So if you can, stymie this process in an effort to say, listen, you're not taking care of what you were given. Why would we approved expanding that. And because it affects the neighbors in Otsego and Antrim, and I know Antrim has a history of some issues of their own in one of their communities through a plume issue that they're still trying to deal with at this point in time. So that, from my perspective, as an individual taxpayer in the Fort County region, that would be my opinion.
Thank you. Say one more thing.
Yes.
Just to kind of back that up too is, you know, in my discussions with Randy Roth, there was a meeting that was held that included an attorney for Camp Grayling. And they basically said that they, you know, they felt that they weren't responsible for people's wells. Like that was a local government issue, which really was, you know, took everybody, you know, back a few steps. And just thinking, you know, that is totally not correct. I mean, this is, even though it was unintentional, right? I mean, airports and military bases are dealing with this PFAS issue all over the place. And it was through no fault of their own. They were required to use this firefighting foam. It's not like they did anything wrong, but the federal government, you know, our view, especially like with dealing with Houston and other issues, is that, you know, they really need to step in and try to mitigate and remediate these issues instead of just letting them linger, which is what has been happening. So I totally agree with what Commissioner Christensen said. You know, I think maybe some action will, you know, maybe get them off their, you know, get them to do something.
Yes.
So.
Other discussion?
I just have one more question too, really quick, because you mentioned Antrim County and this resolution says in Otsego County.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that there was any expansion in the Antrim, I guess.
Just the northeastern edge of Antrim, what I understand.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if that the resolution should be amended to, if that is the case, to include Antrim.
Sorry? I'm sorry, I don't have like all the townships memorized.
It says a portion of this proposed expansion will include areas within Otsego County. It doesn't say Antrim County, so I'm wondering if Antrim should be included.
Where are you at? Sorry.
It is like the 4th or 5th paragraph down on the first page. Right above, yeah,
Okay.
above A, B, and C, a portion of this
Well,
proposed
and
expansion.
find it and put it in there, what you do with it, it's truly legend.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think we probably need to do a little more research before we add that
Yeah.
part in to what we have in
Okay.
front of us. The third bullet point down says our community includes, and the word "the" should be struck, and there should be a comma after Antrim, just to, I try not to be too picky, but it's proper grammar. So, Commissioner Turnbull and Commissioner Mason, are you good with a friendly amendment to fix that grammar?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other than that, I believe that resolutions do require a roll call vote, so I will ask for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Rubin,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Gill,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Levi,
Yes.
Commissioner Chamberlain,
Yes.
Commissioner Turnbull,
Yes.
Commissioner Mapes.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Monty.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Next on our agenda is set time for monthly bill pay meeting. Shannon?
Chairman, this goes along with the next item on our agenda, the monthly approval of bills that Commissioner Leanway is going to talk about. So if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it over to her and we'll just take care of two at the same time.
At the last meeting, we had two people attend the committee meeting. And there was discussion whether if it's a committee, we need to take minutes, make it an open meeting, post it. And thank God, Don, that you showed up, that we had two people that approved the bills. We went through every single bill. The process that we had at the last board meeting was very hard to understand. So Shannon, with her two staff, was very good about it. And I made it known that I would like it a lot easier for being the chair of that committee and being the treasurer of the board. I would like it to be a lot more transparent, I guess you could say, to the board, so that they would know what the bills were when it came time to approve the bills every month. So what she did is we worked together and she went back and she explained every single bill and what it was for you, so that when you have approval, you will know. And it's all in alphabetical order, which I thought was a great idea, because if you ever need to go back and look, you'll know exactly where it's at. What I'd like to do, being the chair of that committee, I would like it to be very consistent, to be very transparent. And little did I know until we had that meeting that there was a calendar in our packet last month that told all the dates for approval of the bills. And I went through and I made sure that they were on my calendar, and I would like to attend them every single meeting. I would like, as the chair, to have one person that's on our finance committee to do them with me. If there's only two people, then we don't have to have an open public meeting. It doesn't have to be posted. It's just approval of the bills. And that's what I would like to do. I have a worksheet that I set up. I don't know, Ed, if you want to do it. If Ed or Henry can't do it, I'm taking Scott with me. I'll make sure. I'll go to his house guy up and bring him here. But I just would like you to fill them out so that Shannon would make her job easier, so that she knows who the two people are that will do it for around the 15th of every month. And if the committee of two people, well, I shouldn't say it's a committee, the two people that look over the bills, if we have an issue that we think is a problem, we can bring it to the board meeting. From what I've seen, it seems like it's the same bills over and over and over. It has to do with dental supplies, contracts, union leases, and just people that are asking for their money back from my fund. And that is not the committee. The committee, under the committee part, we will still have committees. When we have to do a budget, then we will have to have a committee meeting, but this is just for approval of bills. And then that way we won't have to worry about doing actual committee meetings, posting them, or having minutes. And that's one of my recommendations of what I'd like to do. We went back and looked in the bylaws, and it's not in the bylaws that say we have to have board approval. It's pretty much up to the chair. So that's my recommendation. Anybody have a problem with that? Let me know. I think it would be more consistent.
It depends on whether I have a meeting in conflict with his meeting here.
Well, if we only have two people, then you don't have to have it anymore. We would share so that it would be me and whoever else. It would be a lot easier on all of us. Not the committee, but the approval bills.
Shannon, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we can do that via Zoom, so the two people, we need at least two signatures to sign off to pay the bills every month. That goes back way before me. So this would ensure that we have two people, because at the last meeting when we thought we had two, thank goodness we showed up, because that was our second. Somebody had a cancellation, and I understand everybody's very busy, and I don't grudge anybody that. But this will just guarantee that we've got two signatures to move forward to pay the bills each month. We would just review the bill pay. It's much cleaner. Instead of that whole stack of paperwork that you had last time, this is all nicely laid out in 3 pages, and it tells you who we're paying, how much, and what it's for. So it's much cleaner, much easier to read. It will still be reviewed by the committee. That's part of our operations. We're not going to hide this or anything like that. I want everybody to be able to see anything they have questions about. So, but it would just clean it up, make it more efficient. And then, we've got those two people. We can do it via Zoom, so you don't have to drive all the way over here. We can take care of it that way and ask all the questions you like.
And we, the last meeting I did at 10 o'clock in the morning, just to keep it consistent with the board meeting, but if you can't do 10 o'clock that month, we can change it.
So the reason I couldn't make it is because the Sanitary Board of Appeals meeting was at 10 o'clock.
We'll change it.
At Emmett County,
So the month that you have, we'll change it. So it's more convenient for you.
yeah, so, anyway,
If
We'll work around
if you just have two people, if one person can't make it, you can call someone else. I mean,
Well, if
The-
they
the
sign
bottom-
up, we'll know they'll make it.
right. I mean, the bottom line is it's critical that we have two people here to look over the bills.
Yes, and people don't know know, but we docu-sign this stuff, so we do signatures, it's not just, yeah, whatever. And she has 3 people, and they were very good at answering our questions.
Anything else on that, or?
No, sir.
All right. Next on our agenda, we have the consideration of the table motion for February 7th. I believe that Mr. Mason made the motion to table, so he has to bring it up for reconsideration.
I think we need to approve the bill, don't you?
Oh, we're gonna,
Oh, yes, thank you.
That's next.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a motion to approve, right?
Yes, I will make that motion to approve the bills, because I did go over that.
okay. I didn't have that on the agenda. So
I think that's actually
Yeah,
at the end of the agenda. I think that was just to prompt the discussion about the monthly approval process.
where is it on the agenda?
It's under Personnel and Finance Committee Accounts Payable.
13.
It's number
It's right
13.
here.
They changed it?
No,
It's-
that's usually, it's not
It's
usually at
usually
the.
at the end of the.
Oh,
the agenda.
sorry.
Oh, you're
That's
fine.
okay.
We
That's-
just
yeah.
put this on earlier to prompt the discussion about the meeting. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
We
thank
will
you.
come back to the bills towards the end.
Yeah.
All right.
No. You've got an amendment in this motion now, correct?
You need to make a motion to bring it off the table first before you can amend the motion.
Okay. I move that we reconsider the motion that was tabled 1 month ago.
Then we need a second for that. I will second that. Okay. Any discussion on reconsideration? If not,
I actually have.
oh, go ahead.
I don't care how the chips fall here, but I wasn't at last month, so I don't know what the resolution is. So to ask me to vote on whether or not we should bring that off the table,
The original motion from last month was to ask the health department to bring all grants before the program and evaluation committee, before the application process started. And just ask for to look over it and approve. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of reconsideration, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now, if you would like to amend the motion, or if you want me to amend the motion.
Okay, you have language for that amending the motion, do you?
Well, let me just give a little bit of background first. So when I made the motion, I had no idea how many grants there were. Okay, that's just, I'd never seen it. So there are 4 pages of grants. I have them in front of me right now. Page 1, the grand total on page 1 is $2 million. The grand total on page 2 is $6.6 million. The grand total on page 3 is $3.1 million. And the grand total on page 4 is $216,000. So we talked about this in committee. There's a number of these grants that supply funding for programs that the health department is required to perform in the Michigan Public Health Code. Water testing, immunizations.
Food,
Yeah.
yeah, sewage, right.
The list goes on.
Right.
So my motion to amend the motion would be to ask the health department to bring the grants that are not statutorily required before the program and evaluation committee. And I would ask for a second at this time.
I will second.
Okay. Now we can have discussion on that. Mr. Mason?
I think the discussion centers around what we need to do is that separation of grants which properly fund the department, which may be the majority of the grants, it could be 2/3 of the grants. So So what we need to do is bring forward grants that we can look at that haven't got to do with operational grants in the immediate, for the immediate of knowing where this money is coming from, what program. Like mindfulness. Those are the grants that very much concern us. And so this amendment is to have a clear picture of what we need to look at as in total. We don't want to have to look at every single grant and come up with an answer for that. We'll be here forever. There are too many good grants that the department is using to fund itself.
Yes.
Since the last meeting, we asked to have the program committee to work with you and come back with a suggestion. It doesn't sound like that happened. I liked Larry Dyer in the audience suggestion about the process. And I think the process is really important of what the people who write grants will know more of how we feel. And I think that's really a good idea. I think that what you just said, Henry, is true. It's too much work. It would be very micromanaging to go to every single grant that you would have to write. And poor Kathleen over there, I would be just wondering if I should write a grant or not every time. It would be so hard as a grant writer to do that. And I think that by doing us as a process, and I think that the committee could do that, of what we expect and don't expect. I'm sure we know what's in our budget, what's planning going to be in the budget, things that might come down the pipe, because since COVID, grants are 2 weeks. That's all you get. I'm not on that committee. I'm not the executive director, so I don't know. I don't know if it would just be one process with calling people on the program committee. I don't know. I just know that I don't feel that something came back that gave us an answer.
Well, I can tell you the last, the program and evaluation committee, and we have another one scheduled for this Thursday. We basically went through the existing grants that we have, right? And I mean, that took a couple hours, right? And then, after that, people had to go and, we couldn't extend beyond that. But I guess I would just ask that, this motion, amended motion, just basically send the question to the program and evaluation committee for further study to determine what is the best way to handle this. I mean, understanding that the board would like more oversight than what they previously have had. Totally get that. It's just how do we do this that makes sense? How do we do it that is not micromanaging, that allows staff to spend their time efficiently and effectively? And I think there's a way that we can do that. I think we just need more time.
I'm supportive of that. I think that's great. That's what I thought was going to happen at the last meeting, but obviously it's more work than what people realize.
Yeah, there just wasn't enough time at the last meeting.
Yeah, that was a huge amount of conversation that took place, and a huge amount of staff sharing knowledge with us on the committee as to what all those grants were for. It was just unreal, I just could not believe that list, when I first saw it. But I agree, we need to get some more time. I'm not in the mood for micromanaging. Because if we don't do it with
I have Chris first and Henry second.
Sorry.
And Mr. Chair, so a couple of questions that I would ask. Of the 4 pages of grants that you provided with, how many of those are renewals on an annual basis? That would be one question you'd want to ferret out. I mean, because the larger picture here is that, in Charlotte County, we contribute, I don't know, somewhere between $380,000 and $400,000. Emmett gets a little bit more than that, and Genesee will give a little bit less than that. But all told, that number comes out to roughly $1.5 million. It somehow translates to $20 million worth of budget. So it's pretty safe to assume that $18 million difference is made up mostly in grants and whatever these may be. And I think it's a great idea to separate them between, what's needed for, we use the term minimum adequate services, but required services provided by the government are provided by the health department. So that's a great way to delineate. And then in addition to that, I think that you could look into how many of these are just going to be renewals and grants we've been receiving for 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, or whatever that might be. And then you can ferret that process out into, is this a new grant? Did this grant exist before? And then take a kind of a better grip on the programming in that regard. If you're tackling new grants that didn't exist, whereas you're trying to renew grants that you've already been receiving, especially if it's a matter of operations on a day-to-day business. I mean, in Charlotte County, our grant process is it comes through committee, but when it's renewal, the renewals are just, this is the same grant you've applied for the, however many years, and then that's passed on to the full board and then it's approved in that capacity. Generally, the numbers change. I mean, we all vote, as county commissioners, we all vote for whatever court projects, probate, they have, ours is a court school, things of those nature. And they're always trying to find different funds for different programs and things. But they have to come and present to us, here's a new one that we just found, and we're gonna tackle this program, and this is the intent. And then we have the ability to say yay or nay on that. So, but I don't disagree with Mr. Lanway in regards to, ferreting out a more defined process. I think would probably benefit this board in the grand picture.
Mr. Mason.
Yeah, but why can't we want to amend the motion, why can't we take care of that now rather than breaking this down the road? Take a few minutes and clarify that and then vote. Is there any reason not to get on with it today? Because we could break this down the road months from now.
Well, I think that what you're asking is to have a person that works at the health department going to the program committee for every grant. That's not what we were talking about. We want the program committee to work this out. Oh,
I mean, honestly, if I can speak, Mr. Chairman. We'd like the opportunity to propose a guideline, propose a policy, if you will, to basically guide this process. And I think the board would have a better, once that is presented to the program and evaluation committee, approved through that process and then taken to the full board seems like a well thought out way of dealing with, this issue. And it may take, another month or two, but I don't know that would really make much of a difference in the big scheme of things. I think it's more important to get it right.
Can I ask a question of you?
Absolutely.
When is the last time that any of these grants have been brought before the program committee or the board?
We don't currently have a policy that specifies that grants are brought to the full board. I know that over time, some grants require like a resolution or board action to move as part of the process. So that's happened, but on a regular basis, it hasn't happened. There's not a policy that currently exists.
Because part of my intention in moving this forward was, over the past couple of years, I've seen different grants that, to be frank, totally honest, the public had no interest in. And so if the board has no say in a grant that, let's just use mindfulness as an example for a minute. The vast majority of the public wasn't interested in it. But interested or not interested, we had a health department person who applied for it. I don't know how many hours they spent. I know most grant applications that I look at are 30 to 40 pages long. They spent a lot of time applying for it, and it came up to the board, and the board said no. So my intention in making the motion was, before we have a health department employee put in all those hours, paperwork, gathering information, if we have grants that the public isn't really interested in, let's just save them the time and the embarrassment of being turned down halfway through the process. So that.
Can I ask, was that mindfulness grant a previous grant or was that a new grant?
Kathleen would
I'm
know.
not exactly sure how long we've had that grant in place. but-
Yeah, that grant, started in 2020, so it wasn't a brand new grant, no, that was at least the second. With COVID, with the pandemic, it got offset, so I don't remember exactly what year it was applied for, but it was a
What
situation.
Commissioner Christensen said was, you're going along with that. If it's a new grant, I can understand it coming to the board, because it's not something that you've done, and it would need approval. I was under the understanding that was a new grant, so that's really interesting. You had it all those years.
Well, I don't think the board knew about it for, I don't know when.
Well, it came up in a staff report, in Kathleen's report, and that's why it was discussed at the board level, because there was questions about it, based on what was presented in the report, and that's how that got brought up in December.
Yes, and technically it's new compared to some of the grants that go back years, and are more concerned with operational and something like that put into the schools, which should be the concern of the board. And so you have more perhaps than just that grant that should be questioned going back, not just everything coming forward now. You still have grants out there that aren't necessary grants to the board's operation, to the department's operation. These added, if we stumbled into that, like you said, it was given as a report. I had no idea what was going to come when I asked some questions. I was totally innocent, but for good reason. Yes.
Yeah, and I would just, Chairman, is it? Yeah. I would just say that, all the grants that we have are approved through the budget process. I mean, there is oversight, through that process. I get that, we're not going into great detail. You're looking at a huge budget and, but it is through that process. I mean, it is approved by the board through that process. I think, Mr. Mason, you were fairly new to the board. I believe started in November, right? So you weren't part of that, the budget process.
Not prior to that.
Right, yes. So,
But even the budget process, I mean, I looked over the budget last year and these grants are listed in a line item of $12 million for grants. So
right.
I mean, I guess we could have pulled $1 million out. I mean,
Well,
I don't feel that that's necessarily the best way forward either.
No, it's not. Definitely not. I think, basically what we had talked about in developing a process with guidelines and a policy seems, I think it seems like it would benefit all parties here. So we make sure that we can do things that are transparent, that the board is aware of, and then that we can operate efficiently and effectively. I mean, that's really the issue here. Because some grants do come in and we have a very short turnaround time. That is just reality that we have to deal with. So.
Yes, I just wanted to say, in my opinion, sitting here listening to the conversation, I feel like we're almost beating around the bush on a few of the issues, but really what we're looking at and we're hearing is this motion isn't about a witch hunt. It's not to go through and let's find all the bad grants and cut them out and get rid of them. But more, it's on a positive note, it's an increased communication, increased dialogue between the program evaluation committee and the health department, just as like we did with the last meeting where, I mean, it was a little lengthy going through each grant. I thought it was fantastic sitting there and the knowledge that they had just off the cuff, like, yeah, how many people does this help? How is this helping this many people in these counties? Great, how much does it cost? It costs this much. I mean, it saw the program evaluation committee leaning heavily upon the knowledge and the expertise of the health department. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a witch hunt. It wasn't us trying to, be nitpicky, like, what can we get rid of to, make the world a better place? But it was, hey, let's talk about what there is and see, what is really good. And I loved how one of the individuals was talking just about that. We're not, this vote isn't to get rid of any grants.
this vote is to make it so we'd love to sit down and when we run through the grants, like, here's the new grants that are coming up, here are the ones that we're gonna renew. We'd love for it to be, these are all perfect, like, we want that, that perfect scenario where everything is great. It's just that open dialogue between y'all and the Department of Evaluation Committee. So that's kind of what I'm hearing from it. And I just wanted to make my statement saying that it's not, by the vote, it's not a witch hunt. We're not going through to, we're not trying to cut the funding for the health department because they are doing great things. If there are areas that can be cut, then so be it. I mean, there's always areas in all of our lives I'm sure we could reevaluate and look at. But it does give us a great opportunity to represent the people. So when people come up and they're like, how is the health department helping? It's like, well, let me tell you about these great grants. That's just kind of my opinion right here. Thank you.
I just had 2 points. To Mr. Mason's point, I think that there's an opportunity here for the program committee to delineate these grants and to say, look, these are what we need for the operations in the day-to-day, and these are extra grants or extra programs. And perhaps, to Mr. Mason's point, a baseline needs to be created anyway, especially since you have so many new members on this board anyway. In addition to that, take all the new members and say, okay, Mr. Mason, this is what these grants are. Mr. Turnbull's point, after sitting through that, he was impressed with the vast knowledge that sits in the health department and the expertise that's provided there. So maybe a baseline needs to be created out of that program committee, and then going forward, you're able to put a process and a policy together that says, okay, if it's a new grant, then we're going to get a presentation. If it's not a new grant, it's a renewal grant, we get an explanation from whomever, but we wouldn't have this renewal because the deadline, the renewal application because the deadline is at the time. And you can set that to whether it's with this board's approval or not. And then the second point that I want to make is, while I completely understand the vast majority and all that stuff, at the end of the day, as elected officials, I think it's important to remember, it's probably not the most popular comments we made today, but we represent everybody, even the people that didn't vote for us. So just because they're afraid to pick up a phone and call and tell me how they disagree with me, doesn't mean that I can't represent them. So I think any success of any grant that's written by this health department should be measured in the number of people that use it, the number of people that are affected by it, versus the time and man hours that were put into achieving it. Because if you can balance it that way, and like, for example, I know in all the years that I've been serving the county, that Antrim County has a mammogram program that they wrote grants for, but not necessarily the other 3 counties qualify for that same program. And I'm pretty sure that that's pretty important to the people of Antrim County, but that doesn't give me the right in Shelby County because it affects me or doesn't affect me to vote no on something to that nature. So I think it's important to just keep that in mind. And again, I'm not chastising everybody. I agree with a lot of the points that have been made here, but I do think that there's an opportunity, to Mr. Mason's point, you probably need a baseline of these grants to say, this is what we've done, this is what we're doing, and this is where we're headed, in an effort to try and educate the board to be able to make this a process that is more transparent, which I believe that's the desire, right, Jared? So your intent is to be more transparent, but the monies that are being funded here. The problem is you got a large animal, right? I mean, $18.5 million worth of grant money versus $2.5 million worth of math to try and track down. And that's daunting task, but for the program committee, the commissioners serve on that program committee.
Yes.
Okay.
It's one from each county.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So, yeah, I think it's a good start first. My opinion. Sorry.
I think that's a great summary. And it's not just grants come, there are grants out there. Right.
That was one question I had. Do you have a total how many grants there are? Do you have a grand total? I mean, we have the dollar amount, it's almost 12 million. But do you know the number?
Of the number on that sheet.
Right.
Capture that sheet. I don't have it in
Yeah.
front of me, the number, but
I mean, if you just say 20, 25 a sheet,
yeah, there's
probably 90 grants, 100 grants, somewhere in there. How many are applied for that we don't get? You know?
We don't typically track that, but.
Well, and, you know, it's information that
Yes.
would be nice to know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it happens, right? You apply for a grant and you don't get it. I mean, that's, but I will say that we've been pretty successful in the grants that we've applied for because we have good staff that are good grant writers and, you have to, you basically have to bring information to the table, say, this is why we need this grant, right? Based on like the community health needs assessment, we use a lot to justify whether or not we need a grant to do certain programs and things like that. So, but I don't have those details as far as exacts, numbers on what we've been successful with what we have. But yeah.
Is there any other discussion before we vote on the motion before us?
Do we really need to vote on?
Well, it is on the table.
It sounds like we're gonna work on it.
If we vote on this now and we approve it, we can still come back and do the amending with the information that's put out there by the department. And
So
no damage, we're not asking for an immediate remedy of going through every grant, you know. So it is on the table and it allows us to move forward rather than slipping backward.
So I'm confused. What are you asking in this motion?
The motion is to place a priority on the grants that aren't statutorily required and to bring those before the program evaluation committee first. Because there's 100 grants, like Mr. Mason said, we really don't want to look at all. I mean, we'll be there for,
What the motion says you will.
no, just the ones that are not statutorily required, which is, what would you say, about a third of them?
Oh, I'd go the other way. About a third are statutorily required, and
Two thirds not.
not.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I just looked at them, I couldn't, there's a lot of them I can't determine exactly.
To be clear, one other point that hasn't been brought up, just so you understand our processes, these grants are not due all at the same time. This is continuously throughout the year. So we don't necessarily know the deadlines ahead of time, just so you understand the process as you're voting on this.
Yeah.
We can make that work, but just know that the program committee will be calling throughout the year. It's not just a one-time.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Just bring up one other point too. After the last board meeting, we had quite a few staff that were concerned, thinking that if their program, suddenly gets ended, then their job ends, right? So, I mean, it's just a factor to think about. That's why I'm so, I just wanted to go at this in a very measured and thoughtful approach. Because there are people that are, they pay attention, our staff pay attention. We spent quite a bit of time talking to staff after the last meeting because of that. So I just want you to be aware of that. Yep. Since you represent, basically the employees of the health department. So
I agree that we're not coming after it with a butcher knife. So, but it needs close attention. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I want to apologize for.
No, you're fine.
My questions would have been answered if I just kept quiet for 2 more minutes. But being new to this committee, being new to even a commissionership, stuff that needs to go on, and I especially want to know that the staff of the health department, it's not an issue of distrust with me. It's an issue of transparency and being able to see what I need to see so that I have that, I get asked questions. I can honestly answer those questions. It sounds to me like there hasn't been a whole lot of transparency in the past, and I think that we need to take steps to correct that. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm interested for. It's not about, taking anybody's jobs from them. Making drastic changes is going to affect the operations of the health department because you're doing a good job, obviously. Just reading stuff in health departments, I hear Northwest Michigan Health Department, which is more than I really love it. So I need to question the need for a motion at this point, other than it was moved. 3 words of the motion, and let's see how things go. I mean, we've all spoken what our desires are and what the information is we want. Just allow staff to move on that without having to make a motion to force it to do it. You know, and create a whole bunch of unknowns for staff and people we represent.
So what are you asking?
Well, I'm asking that we just remove the motion from the table altogether. And we've spoken our minds, we've given clear direction, I believe, to the staff of the health department. We've made known what we're expecting from them, the information that we want provided. And let's see where that goes. As being a member of the program and committee, we're going to have opportunities to talk about this further. And we're only, what, 3 months into this. You know, this is basically our second official meeting.
Well, we did effectively remove a grant in December. I guess moving down the road, we would be then making motions to approve or deny a particular grant that we look at, determine we want to go ahead and doing that, or do we want to, should we move forward with this? I mean, that worked. It would be an awful lot of long process doing it individually like that. But
well, let's start with, why don't we just start with finding out, you know, the stuff that's mandatory for the health department and their operations, you know, and let's keep moving on with all of those grants that are currently in place. And, you know, monitor the new ones that are coming in.
That's not what we're asking on the motion.
Well, that's why I'm asking for the motion to be removed. I have no idea what steps that we need to take to do that.
I'll just say that after the last meeting, I had a number of people that talked to me and said, never ever forget the first rule of economics, which is there is no such thing as a free lunch. So we're getting this money, and it's free money to the health department, but it's taxpayer money. And if you follow some of these grants back, I've looked into a couple of them. A lot of them will flow back to the federal government. And the federal government lately has been in the big business of creating money. And that's why we have inflation where we have. They just are sending checks out to people. They're printing money for programs they think are good. We need to be mindful that it's tax money and federal money is created. State money, a lot of state money comes from the federal government. And they list their strings that are attached to that, and it has ramifications. We recently had a grant that came before Antrim County about marijuana and lock boxes. And I got a bunch of phone calls, emails. It wasn't 60% that were opposed. It wasn't 70% that were opposed. Every person in Antrim County that contacted me was opposed to this. It was 100%. So I'll just give an example. I had people that were adamantly opposed to marijuana and the fact that it got legalized. And they're obviously opposed to spending taxpayer money to buy lock boxes for people and for a media campaign. Then I had people that are like, beer's legal, marijuana's legal. You aren't buying us a lockable fridge to lock up our booze, so why would you need to buy us a lockbox to lock up our weed? And they were like, we don't see why you need to spend taxpayer money to tell us to lock stuff up. Then I had people who like marijuana. They like to smoke it sometimes. And they're like, it's a great thing. Feels kind of good to smoke it. It's not that dangerous, so why would we have to lock it up? So the bottom line is I had 3 groups of people that contacted me, and they were all opposed to it. So I'm just listing that as an example. I think we need to be really cognizant that a lot of these grants do great things, but some of them, there's been no oversight or transparency from what I can tell in the last decade. So
That's what we need to set as a goal, as a board, trying to establish that transparency and that oversight, because it hasn't been there.
And I believe that motion is the steps to take to do that.
I think we should move forward with the motion. And, I think we can judiciously handle this without an axe to the tree trunk.
Well, I haven't heard a motion that doesn't swing an axe.
So who seconded that motion?
I did.
I think we probably all had our say. It's probably time to go for a vote. Unless I see anybody else raising. Oh, yes, Mr. Turnbull.
Would you mind reading the motion?
Yeah.
One last time, please.
Yeah, the motion was made to require the health department to bring forth non-statutory grants before the programming evaluation committee going forward. Yes.
Commissioner Reeves?
Non-statutory.
Non-statutory.
I know you're gonna go out, I'm trying to, how you define that, I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty big, that was all, I'm sorry.
Non-statutory, I'll be yes.
Commissioner Newsom?
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen?
No.
Commissioner Levin? No. Commissioner Turnbull?
Yes.
Commissioner Chamberlain?
No.
Commissioner Rubin?
Yes.
Commissioner Knapp?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is staff reports. Public health finance presentation. Shannon.
Does everybody need a break before we start?
You know, that's a great point. Let's take a 5 or 10 minute break. Stretch our legs, use the restroom. I will call it back to order at 11:55.
This is at Seagull Lake, this is our 75. This is very fine right here. This is the intersection of Cass and so you can see where this line right here, and this line is just southeastern corner. So
Okay. I was gonna give you, do you want to set up the start immediately? Okay. So what you'll do, this is gonna be new app. You'll be working off this audio. Is there anything here? Yeah. Is everybody good about on the right side? Or the video? Commissioners, you hit start video. Yes. And this is actually what everybody is saying.
And then to advance the sign, just reporting back.
But I'm sure these might go great.
Find our seats, please.
You want to stay on once in a while? You want to go get to a front row seat? You're gonna have to go on there. Should I go that way? So if you mix it up a little.
Oh, yeah.
I can do that, I can do
I would like to call it back to order. The next thing on our agenda is Shannon with Public Health Finance.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to give a brief overview today of the finances for the health department. We are not simple. It is complex. It is a very, very unique accounting situation, if there ever was in the world. This happens to be my area of expertise, so lucky me. But I will be very clear. I just want to let you know in front of, we are not like a manufacturing place where we manufacture widgets and you got things coming in and going out. It's a lot more complex than that. There's different buckets of money, different funding sources, different things like that. So I'm going to do my very best to break this down. I'm going to keep it very high level today. If we want to dive into details later, I am happy to dive as deep as anybody wants to go. But for the sake of time, and giving everybody, we've got a lot of new board members here. I want to make sure you understand the high level before we dig down into the weeds. So this is just going to be a very high level presentation today. And Dan has switched places with me and he's just going to keep hitting slides up for me. So go ahead. And to give you a little bit of my background, I've been in this role for all of 6 months. Yes, I'm still counting in months. I came here at the end of August. I was born and raised in Charlevoix, graduated from Charlevoix High School. I was actually the class valedictorian. Went on to Alma College, graduated with a bachelor's degree, summa cum laude, and I have a dual majors in dance and accounting. And most people look at me and go, huh? I like to joke, if you know anything about dance, we count everything in fours, so I like to say that I count to 4 a lot. But I'm very right and left brained, and I think that's what really helps me in this role. I have that creative streak, and I found that I have to do both to be happy in life. So I'm what you call a creative accountant, and there's not many of us in the world, so we found one of a kind. When I graduated from Alma, I became an auditor with Ernst & Young, also called EY, out of their Detroit office. It's one of the top 30 accounting firms in the nation, or world actually now. Worked in their office for a little over a year. Then I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. It's beautiful, it was warm, I loved it. I spent 15 years there at the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and that is where I really cut my teeth in this whole realm of accounting and how this works. I started out as the auditor / accountant for their regulatory services division. Much like the health department has, we did food inspections, all kinds of inspections and things like that, plant, pesticide, animal health, you name it. After that, I became the internal auditor for the department. Then I became the fiscal and administrative services coordinator. And eventually I became the assistant commissioner and chief financial officer for the department. Our department was a little bit of a larger budget. It had $188 million annually and 750 employees. I spent a lot of time at the legislature, being on the hot seat, as I used to call it, in budget meetings. So this is really no different. I feel like it's just different faces. So very comfortable in this role. Move on to the next one. So at the health department, I think sometimes, I want to be clear, I think sometimes people think they're just winging it as they go. Not true. In accounting, in the world of accounting, there are a lot of rules that we have to follow, and for good reason. We've conformed to the generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, as we like to call it. These are nationwide. Any business that in the world is conforming to these, if they've got any sort of accountant that is worth their salt, they are conforming to GAAP. In addition to that, internally, just in the finance area, we have 42 internal policies and procedures that dictate what we do, how we do it, and kind of give that structure. In addition to that, we have a lot of federal and state reporting requirements for the grants that we receive. And I know we've talked about the number of grants, and I think on the break, Melanie added it up, there were 116 on your list here. So of those 116 grants, many of those, and then we get to that in just a second, are state and federally funded, which means we have a lot of reporting to do. And that is reporting that if we don't meet those requirements, we don't get the funding. So there are checks and balances there. The last thing, we have an annual audit, and we just finished it. The auditors, there was a chance they were going to present the annual audit at this meeting, but they have been a little bit delayed. So we will be talking with them at the next meeting in April to get our annual audit results. Every year, it's kind of our end of the year evaluation, as we like to look at it. So those are all the checks and balances that we have in place here at the health department. One thing I want to touch on before we get too far, there's a difference when you're looking at your personal checkbook and the checkbook of HDNW. There's a lot more zeros involved, but the concepts are still the same at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how many zeros you put on the end, you still have to abide by the same set of rules and the way that you handle things. But materiality does make a difference. So this is a concept in accounting that we like to use, and it's related to the importance or the significance of an amount. If I'm looking at my personal checkbook and I see that there is a $300 charge, I'm probably going to be telling my husband, what did you buy for $300 and why do I not know about it? If I look at the checkbook here at HDNW and I see a $300 charge for Amazon, I'm going to go, oh, Paul was buying something for the department, not a big deal. There's a difference in those zeros. The total budget, so it always looks different for each organization. You're never going to have the same set of materiality for each organization. Each county is going to have a different level of materiality because you've got different amounts and different priorities that you're looking at. So just to kind of give you a baseline, our total budget annually is $31 million. If you look at that, 1% of that is $310,000. If I'm looking at a charge for $310,000, in my personal account, well, first off, there won't be a charge for $310,000, right? But it gives you kind of a balance of 1% of our budget is $310,000. That's a lot of money. So we are very cautious. We're very responsible with that. I am going to look at a $310,000 charge just to let you know. I'm not going to let that slide. I tend to hold things a little tighter than maybe other accountants in the world. But that just gives you an idea. County versus regional budgets. You have to remember that we are a health department that serves 4 counties, not just 1, 4. So I pulled all the county annual operating budgets, and it's, no surprise, it's anywhere from $15 million to $28 million. At the health department, we come in at $31 million. And you have to remember, serving 4 counties with a budget that's not that significantly higher than the rest, that's pretty good use of resources right there.
Does that include dental?
It does. This does include DCN. I'm going to get to that in a second. Good question. Yes. I'm glad you're asking this question. I like questions. Feel free to ask me anytime. This is what I want to get to. So We took out dental clinics north from that last slide because not all health departments have that dental component. And I'm going to get to comparing us to some other health departments, and I wanted to compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges. So if you look at this slide, this is our $18 million. These are unaudited. I'm giving you fiscal year 22 numbers that technically have not come back from the auditor yet, but we're going to talk to them next week. So this is the most up-to-date information I have to give you. This is what our funding sources look like. So you'll notice grants and donations, and then state and federal grants. Those two combined, the state and federal grants are the majority, obviously, of our budget, but we also have other grants, local grants that we apply for, different types of grants that way. That's the majority of our budget right there. Fees and collections, and this is where you're gonna find dental clinics north, and then all of our licenses and permits. Really falls into our EH program. We've got wells and septic. Mr. Turnbull.
Excuse me, if you don't mind, just one of my handicaps is I can't see. So if you wouldn't mind helping me when you reference stuff that you're talking about, would you mind, when you reference it, talk about it? So like looking at these numbers, looking at these numbers, which are.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and give a quick run through. Our state and federal grants is $9.7 million. That makes it 52% of our budget. Grants and donations, that's local grants, non-state and federal, basically. That's $3.9 million, and that's 21% of our budget. Fees and collections, which is environmental health, retail food inspections, things like that. That is about $4 million, and that's 21% of our budget. And then the local appropriations from each county, that's $1.1 million, or 6% of our budget. So it's actually a very small piece of our pie.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And if I forget, please remind me again. All right, next slide. So how do we compare with other health departments? Uh-oh, Chris is working magic upstairs. Chris, can you send it to the other side?
He's got it.
Okay, good. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we looked at how we compare with other health departments, their total revenues for the fiscal year, their local appropriations, and then what percent of their budget is from local appropriations. When we look at this chart, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, if I counted correctly, other health departments, all in different sizes. We come in second to last as far as local appropriations that make up our budget. In first place, we have Macomb County, obviously a much larger county. Their budget is $39 million a year, 39.8, and 39% of their revenues are local appropriation dollars. Find something that's a little closer to us. Let's take a look at Health Department 10, District Health Department 10. They're $21 million, where we're $17 million. They have 13.5% of their revenues are local appropriations. So it's, where am I? Lost me. 2.9 million versus 1.1 million. The last place is Loose Neck and Albert Schoolcraft, well, in UP. Their $6 million total annual budget. They get $312,000 of local appropriations. They're 5.2%. So we are really low. We're not asking you for a whole lot of money. And that's really because we have some very resourceful people in this department that seek out these grants and these other funding sources. If we give up some of those grants, I'll probably be calling you come budget season. So another point I want to make, I'll go back one.
Sorry.
Yeah. On some of these grants, if we don't spend them, we lose them. So if we have a grant and we are not able to spend the funding, we will lose that funding source going forward. And typically when I say we lose it, I mean, they will send it to a different health department and they'll say, here, you can have it because this health department could not spend it. We try really hard not to do that because we want dollars coming to our communities. We want to help our constituents. And I think we're all on board with that together. So just to let you know that that's what happens when we don't finish those grants. All right, go ahead. Sorry, I'm chatty. I'm trying to go quickly so we are not here all day. So we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty details. And like I said, I'm going to try and keep this high level. This is HDNW's total financials for fiscal year 22. We close our fiscal year September 30th.
Our revenues and collections, we had $31 million, and I kind of already walked through that pie chart. It's the exact same numbers from that pie chart on the previous page that I talked through. Our expenditures, so our salaries and benefits, it's about, well, almost $15 million. We don't make things here. We don't make widgets, we don't make cars, we don't make things like that. We serve people. We help people. So our biggest expenditure is the people that we have on staff to provide those services. We hire professionals, mental health professionals, medical professionals, environmental professionals. Dan can rattle off environmental stuff like I can't even imagine. So these are the types of people that we're hiring. And so it's no surprise that our salary line is going to be high. We don't make other things. We provide those services. Supplies and materials, it's about $3 million last year. Contractual and consultant, 9.5 million. And you're probably going to ask me what makes that up. We typically will hire out some of the things that we get a grant to do services and we don't have all the staff to do it. We will work with other entities and other nonprofits, maybe even other health departments like Grand Traverse Health Department. If we're working a grant together to get the funding to Northern Michigan, we'll work together. And so that comes in under our contractual and consultant line here. Yes.
Just a question. So of that $9 million, $9.5 million, how much of that would be represented by the dental clinic?
I can break it down for
The
you.
health department doesn't employ members of the dental.
I'm going to break
correct?
it down on two slides.
I'll wait patiently.
You guys have such good questions. All right. Communications. It's about $218,000. Travel is $285,000, and that's just us going around, getting to other locations, serving the population that we serve. Rent for our buildings, $970,000. This does include DCN, so there's a lot of extra buildings. Equipment is $154,000, and then other expenses, almost $2 million. And somebody is going to ask me what's in the other, because everybody tends to try and hide things in other. I'm not going to hide anything in other. So next slide, please. Well, other expenses. We've got other contractual expenses, the things that were not included in the other one. These are subscriptions. A lot of this $385,000 for other contractual expenses came from temporary employees that we hired during our COVID clinics. Remember, this is fiscal year 22. This is not the current today number. So that's what makes up the majority of that. Stipends and honorariums, almost $54,000. Health services, these are our lab services. It's expensive to run labs. $742,000. Advertising, program promotions. Most of these, this is not us just blowing money on advertising. A lot of these are written into the grants and programs that we do. We're advertising the service that we're here to provide, or we're advertising something that we can help with. So most of this is paid for with grant dollars. It's $195,000. I'm rounding in case you didn't notice. Insurance bonds, we carry fiduciary insurance, all kinds of lovely insurance, $51,000. Equipment maintenance and repair, a lot of our lab equipment, we carry, the repair, maintenance and repair contracts on those. It's $94,000. Computer maintenance, this is a lot of our software subscriptions. So our health space subscriptions, our Patagonia subscriptions to be able to keep track of everything.
Microsoft 365.
Yes, Microsoft 365. Yes, thank you. $210,000. Equipment rental. This is not very much, $54,000. Education and training, $65,000. Membership dues and subscriptions, that's $62,000. And then miscellaneous and other expenses. This is $255,000, which is a little more significant than most of these. There was a settlement for the previous health officer in this line item from last year. So that's where you will find that. So that's our total, $2.2 million in other expenses. Okay. Questions? We good? Okay. Next slide. Now we're going to break it out. Here you go. Here's your
I've got a
DCN.
bunch. Let's go.
All right, good. So we've got revenues. I broke out because most health departments don't have this dental piece. We are unique in that feature. And I will be quite honest with you. If you look, we closed $310,000
to the negative. Not a great thing to do as an agency. But DCN, 121,000 to the positive. So we're netting negative $188,000. If we did not have this component, we'd be sitting in a much, much worse financial place, to be quite honest. Last year, this was flipped. Last year, they were in the negative, they were understaffed, they didn't have what they have now, and we were to the positive. So we're helping each other. It's very much a symbiotic relationship when it comes to closing. I guarantee you when the auditor talks to us next week, this is gonna come up. This negative $188,000. It's not good to close in the negative. But you have to remember, there's a $249,000 settlement in here with legal fees from last year. So look at that, that's the majority of what's going on. Is what it is, the numbers are just there, I'm just reporting, so. All right, questions?
So I just have a couple of
Yep.
questions. Because I mean, we talked about earlier about the statutory required.
Mhm.
And you know, again, I've been around too long, as Dr. Josh said, but I've been here before. I've been here before the dental clinic existed, so that brings me to asking questions about it.
You just dated yourself, but I won't say.
That's okay. No, well, because at that point in time, that was a separate entity.
It was.
And now this is also a separate entity, or this is an entity of the health department?
It's an entity of the health department. We are the umbrella for this. It's like a business underneath of us. We track everything separately so that if any day, you know, they said, we're done with you, we want to leave, or we say, we're done with you, we want you to leave, we would know what the costs are looking back. But
Funds that are contributed by the 4 counties aren't supposed to be allocated to that anyway, right? They all go to, right?
Zero.
Yep, I
nothing.
you reported it. So the question is, in fees and collections for the $10,700,000 for fees and collections for the dental clinics north, I'm trying to help Mr. Turnbull at the same time, so I'm trying to help all of us get around this, but for the $10,700,000 that are being collected in fees and collections, how is that just straight dollars for service from the end users? That's not anything that's subsidized by any of the other entities or subsidized by any of the other facilities or different programs that are in the area?
it is only subsidized with reimbursement for dental services. So it could be through private insurance. So you go to the dentist,
Okay.
your insurance pays, we'll be getting income from that. Or we have a lot of Medicaid patients that go to these dental clinics. So they go to the dental clinic, they have a procedure done, we get paid for that procedure. It could also be if, there's a portion that they need to pay, that's also coming in the fees and collections line item. That's the only thing. There's a small grant in there. Let me take that back. A small grant in dental clinics north, you'll see it $213,000 right here that they also get. But the rest of it is that whole fees and collections is just for the services that they provide, dental services.
And that's treated as a complete separate entity of the health department, correct? I mean, I know that it's under the umbrella, but one of the biggest problems has been, it was very hard to explain originally when it was its own separate for-profits, nonprofit, whatever you want to call that, private profit, whatever they had going on in the previous existence of it. It was very hard to delineate that, and it was very hard for anyone that would come to present this information to the county commissioners of how they were actually separated. And that's been a bone of contention for a number of years, at least with some of the commissioners that I've dealt with, as to making sure that these monies stay separate, because otherwise, how do I know that the resources that we're paying for are being dedicated to the services that we're statutorily required to provide?
It's a good question. It's not the clearest relationship you've ever seen in your life, right? Because there's still confusion to this day. But we track HDNW, we track DCN. At the end of the year, this comes back to HDNW and it rolls up into our books in total.
So do you do line item accounting in that if you're doing the accounting for DCN, some of your services are being charged against DCN as well as some of your services being charged against the health department?
Yes.
Okay.
There is payroll for Holly, myself, Dan, other people in this room that comes into DCN's budget. Hold on, for administrative, whatever. There we are, administrative overhead. That's some of our salaries that are going in.
That's why it's reported as, that number is reported as
Yes,
a loss to the health
it's coming
department.
out of HDNW, it's going into DCN as an expense for them.
So the wages and whatever's being reported, those are the total wages that are just being represented like, for example, without getting too far in the weeds,
Mhm.
your wages, that's what you get. You don't get that money from the health department and then a separate amount of
No,
money from
no,
DCN.
no.
Okay,
No, we're
just trying
totally
to
separate, yeah.
clear here, that's all.
Yeah, and then the DCN nonprofit, which staffs the clinics, right, the dentists, the hygienists, all those people, they're in contractual consulting right there. And that's that money, because it is essentially, they don't like when we say this, but a staffing agency. I mean, to provide the professionals to do the dental work, and that is a separate nonprofit.
I
Yeah.
can't say that's true.
Chris, I asked like 3 of the same questions you just asked, and Holly set up a meeting about a month ago with Mr. Mason, myself, and Scott Hankins. And we really got into the weeds of dental clinics north for an hour and a half. But it is separate, but we're kind of like a staffing agency, and it makes our bills look funny too.
Right.
And you're spot on when you come before the county commissioners. I've been asked by other county commissioners many times, what's going on with dental clinics north? How does that work? It's complicated enough that I can't explain it. So that's a problem. But we have gotten, in the recent past, we have gotten more information on it. Holly emailed out the bylaws of dental clinics north. And anytime you have a nonprofit or a governmental organization, you have the bylaws, that helps, at least me, wrap your mind around what we're doing and why. Yeah, and did that go to this whole board, or did that just go to the program committee?
Yeah, that just went to Mr. Mason, yourself, and then Mr. Hankins, who were at that small meeting. And I'm gonna be doing a full presentation like Shannon on dental clinics north coming up.
Well, I think it would be really good to email that to this whole board, because we have other county commissioners that ask us, and it's, if we know the basics of it, it's just helpful.
So, Chair.
Yeah.
If you'd also ask to have that sent to the clerk, so she can distribute that to the other commissioners, so they can formulate that. and have it. Otherwise, it's a shotgun approach when they show up at the meeting and go, here it is, and then you gotta try and digest it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions on breakout of HDNW DCN before I move on? This is the meat of this whole presentation.
One other question. You mentioned the settlement that we had. Another big expense that we had was legal fees. So if we take, I don't know where that is. I'm curious, but okay. And I don't know what the grand total was, maybe you know, but I'm just thinking if you take the settlement and you take the mandate fees off,
We probably were.
in the year before, we were fine, and this year, we're gonna be fine, because we don't have those 2 expenses. And,
Right.
and they were both pretty substantial, so,
Exactly. Had we not had it last year, we would have closed to the good.
yeah. Do you know roughly what the legal fees were?
I don't know the legal fees. I know
Okay.
the
I
settlement.
do roughly, I mean, between, the fiscal year 21 and 22, so it kind of spans both, but
Yeah.
it's around 140, 150,000, but they're also increasing because we have those 2 cases that are still in the Michigan Court of Appeals. Okay, so. Has to do with the, we were sued regarding the mask mandate that was implemented by the previous health officer for schools by 2 different groups, one from Otsego County, one from Emmett County.
And I haven't asked about it in a while, but I was kind of assuming that since the mandate ended like a year ago, I kind of thought that was over, but that's not the case.
Well, the lower courts have said it's moot, right, because the mask mandate ended, but the plaintiff keeps on appealing. So you have to continue to defend yourself.
Anytime you have a court case, you either defend yourself or you ask, what do they want? I mean, at this point, what do they want? Do we know?
I think what they're trying to do is get a declaratory judgment against the public health code to basically weaken the public health code, so future orders cannot be made. Because I think that's basically what they're trying to do.
And so are we still spending a lot of money on this? I mean, I kind of I just made an assumption that that was last year's big expense, and now you're kind of telling me we're still continuing. I'm just curious, are we spending a lot of attorney time on this, or?
We haven't recently, but like right now, I got an email back in January from the attorney saying that the plaintiff filed a brief with the Michigan Court of Appeals and that they will be working on their brief. So I haven't got the bill for that yet. So costs are still, racking up as far as that goes, but it hasn't been a tremendous amount. I think the last, time it was at, we had before the Emmett County Circuit Court was in June of 22. And since then, there really hasn't been much going on.
So then my follow-up question is, there were a whole bunch of mandates issued, mass mandates issued. It wasn't just our health department.
Right.
So I'm sure there were lawsuits in those health departments as well. I mean, I guess I'm asking if they're looking at the public health code, what part of that is it our responsibility to defend? I mean, in one way, it seems to me like the state should be defending the public health code. It's not Health Department Northwest. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is that when you get sued, you have to defend yourself, right? So we don't really have a choice in that matter. I mean, this is my opinion, okay? So seeking a declaratory judgment against the public health code is, in my opinion, the wrong way to go about it. If you have a problem with the public health code, you should go through the proper channels, through the legislature, work with your state representative, senator, and if you try to affect change using the legislative process and not the courts. But yeah, some of this is obviously out of our control.
I don't need to get in the weeds of it anymore. I just.
But no, I think that's good for you to hear, for the board to hear about kind of the background of that, because
Unless there's other questions.
yeah.
We'll move on, next slide. I do want to touch on the,
Oh, next.
yeah, the local appropriations. The local appropriations are used to support multiple agency programs that include those essential public health services. Essential public health services, that's code for legally required, okay? So those are the ones that we have to do. And these local appropriations go to some of those. And I think we touched on that in our conversation a little bit earlier. When cost sharing is required by the program, that's how we use this cost share. And I'm going to get into this. This is what makes it so complex, another component besides what we've gotten to so far. And then when matching is available to effectively increase the funding amount. And we're going to get into this in the next slide. So HDNW leverages local dollars to maximize funding. I think your slides might be front to back, so you follow along with me if you've got a hard copy in front of you. As a local health department, we have this unique funding mechanism where we can use Medicaid outreach and Medicaid cost-based reimbursement due to the population that we serve. So we can gain more dollars if we match them. They say, look, you do this program, you find a match to this, and you have even more money. So we provide services for those in the community that are not able to access care from private providers or need additional support not offered by providers. DCN, they have a lot of Medicaid patients who would not otherwise have access to dental services. So that's a good chunk of that on the DCN side. On the HDNW side, we serve people that do not have access to private providers, and we provide services there. And we're matching with these local dollars to get as much money as we can for our clients, for our communities, for our people. Okay.
May I just add one thing?
Yes.
So this is what I've heard from private providers is that because Medicaid reimbursement tends to be lower than what they get from private insurance, they will actually cap the number of patients that they see that have Medicaid as insurance. So it may be 20%. So they only 20% of the patients, and they'll cap it, and then they won't see anybody else that has Medicaid beyond that. So we fill that important niche to fill in the gaps there. So
the other thing, that's a good point. Sometimes because it's such a cumbersome process to go through to get reimbursement from Medicaid and Medicare, there are providers that just say, I'm done. I don't want that headache. I'm not even going to serve those people. I'm not going to deal with this. So that's where we come in, and we've got the staff, the expertise to navigate those systems. Yes, it's cumbersome, it's not easy, but we filled the gap there. For those people that would not otherwise be able to get those services, we can provide that, and we're not afraid to go deal with the channels of paperwork and red tape to get that reimbursement. So, good point. Thank you. So how much funding comes to the health department using local dollars? These are our fiscal 22 numbers. Medicaid outreach eligible for the match was almost $354,000. We matched all $354,000. We're doing as much as we possibly can. I got an abbreviation for this: Children's Special Health Care Services Medicaid Outreach. It's a mouthful. It's about $30,000. We matched $30,000. This is where it gets fun. So the full cost reimbursement for Medicaid services, we had eligible for match almost $295,000. The state matched $850,000. So that's money that we are bringing in to our community to provide services for people who would otherwise not get those services. So in total, the state match. So for every local dollar that goes into these programs, and that's the local appropriations that we are so thankful for from you, we turn it around and we can generate $2.82 using these match programs and saying, look, if we provide a match, will you provide additional dollars? So that's how we get there. If these grants get cut, and this is just an FYI, we lose, we're going to need more appropriations for these matches. So sometimes we use local grants to do these matches. If we use the local grants, we're going to say, okay, we have to match this somehow. Local appropriations is our answer as to how we do it. So we will be asking for an increase if we have to go that route. I'm hoping we don't.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. So if this board decides to cut grants, it's going to be coming to the counties to ask for more money under our appropriations every year.
Correct.
It all depends which grants.
Well,
It's not all grants.
that's a good question.
Not all of them are a match, but the majority have a match component. So yes, not all.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Let me see. Hold on, let me make sure I didn't miss any notes in there that I needed to do on it.
Okay.
Thank you. I should be clear. Let me make something very clear. This local amount, that's the majority of our local dollars are the local appropriations, but that's not everything that's in there. We do have some local grants. So when I say local dollars on this slide, I just want to be very clear that it's not just that. It could be private insurance, it could be local grants that we're matching. So just to be clear, I want to make that statement before we move on, so nobody's wondering. Okay, now we're good with that. Thank you. All right, I'm almost done here. The value of exceptional public health services in Northwest Michigan. So HDNW is able to keep local appropriation requests low by seeking grants and innovative partnerships. We work through a lot of regional collaborations where it's not just our health department, we're working with other health departments to get as much money for all of Northern Michigan, and I mean from coast to coast here for our people. Multiple studies have shown that when people are connected with services that prevent adverse health outcomes, the overall cost of healthcare in the community is significantly reduced. You're getting people those services, they're going to doctors, they're getting care on the front end before it becomes a bigger problem and they end up in the emergency room, which costs taxpayers more. So we're trying to make sure we can help as much as possible on the front end. The local dollars used in matching programs help support healthy pregnancies, children, moms, and families during critical times in development. So that's a lot of our target audience right there, and a lot of our clientele, but that's not all of our clientele. All right, next slide. So looking forward, what are we doing going forward? We're doing a budget analysis right now. I am trying to wrap my head around this budget as quickly as I possibly can. I am 6 months on the job. Obviously, I know enough to be dangerous up here, but I don't know all the ins and outs yet. So if you ask me, what's the balance on this? I can't spit it back out quite yet. I'm getting there. Give me a little more time. But I am looking at the budget and really digging into it and diving deep, making sure that we've got all the salaries accounted for, that everything's accounted for in our budget. There's some work to be done there, and I want to clean that up first and foremost. Obviously, looking forward, just kind of a general economic outlook for the department. COVID funding is decreasing, so we're seeing a transition to an endemic response. So COVID vaccination clinics are ending. It'll just be part of the suite of vaccinations that we offer at the health department, like any other vaccination we offer. It won't have dollars that are targeted to this program. Fiscal year 22, we increased our partnerships between school districts and HDNW. Working together, we placed 10 school nurses in schools that did not have them. So we're trying to reach out and get in front of children. We also placed mental health professionals in school districts throughout our HDNW service area. And again, this is not us going to them and saying, you need to have a professional. It's them coming to us and saying, we need help. We don't know how to handle this. We need more tools in the toolbox. Can you help us? And we've pooled our resources, looked around and said, yes, we can help with this. So fiscal year 23, we expect an increased revenue in dental services offered by Medicaid. There was legislation that became effective. It was passed and became effective in January. I expect to see the results this week of getting more reimbursement on these Medicaid services that we provide. We talked about how healthcare providers will cap it because they don't receive full reimbursement. Those laws are changing, so that'll be a good thing. And then in fiscal year 23, we expect to see an increase in environmental health type 2 non-community water supply. This program, we have been operating with a stagnant stagnant dollar amount for years and years and years. As salaries go up, costs go up, travel goes up, the cost of everything has gone up over the years. So it has caught up to us. This will be a really nice gap filler for those salaries that we were trying to fund with other ways of making it work and other programs and grants and things like that. So that'll give us a little bit of relief there. And then moving forward, we're trying to return to those pre-pandemic programs and activities. Obviously, it was all hands on deck for a while and some things had to get moved to the back burner. It's time to go to that back burner and pull those things back out and start getting back to the things that we've placed on hold for a little while. So that's the end. Thank you. I appreciate your attention today and listening. Are there any questions before I sit down?
Questions?
If you want to dig further into details, I have a philosophy of running the finances like an open book. So call me, we will sit down. I will dig as deep as you want. We'll stay as high level as you want. I have nothing to hide in these finances. So you got my contact information, call me, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I just would say, I think Mr. Christensen is right on about dental clinics and that documentation and paperwork. Let's email it to all the county commissioners.
Sure.
We get 55 emails a day, whether they read it or not, that's up to them. But if it's referenced, they can pull it up on their iPad and say, oh, the bylaws are on page 2, or this part. Communication and sharing information can sometimes go a long ways. If there's a commissioner that has a constituent that's concerned about it, then he's got the information in front of him and he can answer those questions. So I think that's very well. All right. Health officer report, Mr. Terrell.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, I'll try to be brief. Basically in my report, I just wanted to point out, we have this association that represents health departments in Michigan, called the Michigan Association of Local Public Health. And every year they put out legislative and funding priorities in January approximately. So I basically broke it down by 3 different categories: the policy and legislative priorities. And I'll just go through this really quick and explain it and answer questions. Through boilerplate language, direct the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to conduct a thorough review of actual cost of local health departments to provide essential local public health services. Now, those are those mandated services we talked about. And determine, the key here is determining the actual cost, because in the public health code, it states in the legislation that it should be a 50-50 match, and that has not been the case for years, right? Since like the early 1980s, I think. And so that is something that we've always struggled as local health departments to get back to with providing those mandated services. And that is one, obviously, a huge priority for us. Support the creation and implementation of a statewide onsite wastewater legislation or statewide code consistent with local public health core principles, which were established by the Michigan Association of Local Environmental Health Administrators back in 2019. And I'll give you a little background on this. Michigan is, you may have read in various news outlets, Michigan is the only state in the nation that doesn't have a unified onsite wastewater code. Okay, we have each health department, we have 45 health departments, we all have our different codes. Some of them share a code, like up in the UP. But the point is that we all have our own codes, and they vary quite dramatically. I mean, across the state, and that is a concern in some areas because they are very weak. In Northwest Michigan, our codes are very strong because we value the natural resources in the waters, and we use private drinking water wells to get a lot of our drinking water. So we have a very strong code when it comes to wastewater systems. We are trying to get in front of legislation because it has been introduced for the 26, 27 years I've been in public health and environmental health, leading up to this position. There have been multiple efforts to do a statewide code, but it's come at it from the approach of really not knowing a whole lot about how it would affect, like, the unintended consequences. I'll give you an example. We developed core principles because there was an effort from the state legislature to pass a statewide sanitary code that would have required every septic system in the state to be inspected every 10 years. And all the EH directors throughout the states, all the health departments in northern Michigan in particular, stood up and opposed that legislation because it doesn't make sense, right? How would we even do that? We have thousands of septic systems, and if I installed one 10 years ago and I've been maintaining it regularly and doing what I need to do, why should somebody have to come and inspect that? It doesn't make any sense. And it would have forced us to basically double our staff. We would have had to, put an addition on our buildings to house them. I mean, it just did not make any sense. So we're trying to get in front of it and work with legislators to do something, if that is the will of the legislature, to do something that makes sense, that's common sense driven, and also to keep local control in any legislation that's proposed. Okay, and that's an important aspect of that. Another aspect of policy and legislative priorities would be to promote professional licensure for sanitarians. And that is just kind of a cleanup thing in the public health code, similar to nurses, doctors, other medical professionals. There's a registration component for sanitarians, but it's not a licensure. So it would just bring more credibility to the profession. And we feel that it's important. And then also to support an update to Michigan's food law. It's time. Our current food law is from 2009 that we're using. The FDA food code is from 2009. So we just want to basically use an updated version from 2022. Going into the next category, it's one-time supplemental funding. So we're looking for $3 million in one-time funding for rural community health workers, sustained program initiated by the Michigan Center for Rural Health. And basically, I just want to explain this. This funding expires in May 2023. We have a program here in northern Michigan called Community Connections. It's a collaboration, kind of like Shannon was talking about, between different health departments to provide this service. And we employ community health workers. Okay. This program has saved millions of dollars in Medicaid costs by diverting people away from emergency rooms and other higher cost health services, because we're trying to deal with issues upstream, deal with anything from housing to transportation to food insecurity to things of that nature that you know, when you are facing those things, if you don't know where you're gonna live next week, you're not very likely to go get that screening at your doctor's office, right? Because you're worried about where you're gonna live. I mean, it's low on the priority. So we're not only in that program doing those things and helping those people make those connections to varied resources throughout the region. There's so many resources, and that's really what that program, it's in the name, Community Connections. We're connecting people with resources. But we're not only doing that, but we're teaching them how to do it on their own. Okay, so, you know, basically that old adage that give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach him to fish, they eat for their life, right? So that's kind of what we're doing in that area, and I think it's really important to continue the funding. I think it pays for itself and then some, just by what it saves. We're also looking for 40 million in flexible funding. This is statewide for health departments to invest in capacity for their buildings and just physical infrastructure improvements. Ongoing funding, 23.6 million to increase the state's contribution to essential local public health services. And that is really kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier on about getting to that 50-50 match. Since that point in time in the early to mid 1980s, nationwide, the funding for health departments has gone down. And since it is in the statute that there needs to be a 50-50 contribution from the state, we just really think that that's important. Recently, we got from the state budget recommendation that was introduced by the governor, there was a $30 million increase that was proposed in there, which would more than meet that 50-50 cost share. So that is good news. It's good news for health departments, and it's good news to get them on track to meet that 50-50 requirement. So there's also MELF also supports funding recommendations that were part of the public health resource review to ensure Michigan drinking water quality. And this was developed pursuant to the governor's executive director 9. And this really focused on drinking water, and a lot had to do with replacing lead service lines in more urban areas, but also we have issues that we're dealing with in northern Michigan from emerging environmental health threats like PFAS. And I think more people would test in rural areas if there was funding to help support that. It's expensive to test your well for PFAS. It really is. I mean, it's $200 to $300, and really, when you're talking about families living in rural Michigan, that's a pretty good hit to your budget to do that. So there's enough of this stuff out here that we don't know the extent of it. I think we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg on contamination issues. And there's one big misconception out there is that you can do one test and know everything that's in your water. That's just not the case. You have to know what you're looking for. So there's a PFAS test that you have to do. There is a test for trichloroethylene. There are other factors in that. Volatile organic compounds is what the test is, but they're all expensive. And I think if there was resources out there for people in Michigan to do more of this testing, it would benefit everybody, and people would know what they're drinking. Because we all have this assumption that when we're drinking a glass of water from our tap, it's safe. Right? So some health officer highlights from February. At the February Board of Health meeting, the question was asked of the health department, if we have staff trained in mental health first aid. I didn't know the answer to that question. We actually have, after digging into it, the Family Health Division has 11 staff members, and Community Health Division has 9 staff members who are certified. Mental health first aid is a nationally accredited course offered through North Country Community Mental Health, which focuses on risk factors and warning signs for mental health and addiction concerns. And really what it does is it teaches people, the people going through the course, strategies to help deal with situations like panic attacks, suicidal thoughts or behaviors, non-suicidal self-injury, acute psychosis, overdose due to substance use disorders, in reaction to traumatic events. So really, recovery and resiliency are the key components of this training, and I just wanted to bring more information back to the board regarding that. So Lastly, and most sadly, is Amanda Thompson, our current Director of Family Health, and has served as the interim Deputy Health Officer, has decided to resign to pursue her family business and spend time with her family, which is very bittersweet because I'm very happy for Amanda, but not happy that she's leaving us, but I totally understand. Her last day, she's been very gracious to give us very ample time, and her last day will be May 2nd. And we're very appreciative of that transition time. We are very fortunate to have 2 internal candidates to fill her position, and we did interviews last week and picked the candidate to fill that position, who is Melissa Hahn. So very excited about that, and Amanda will have some time to transition everything that she needs to and leave on a good note. And I know she will be missed greatly, and I certainly appreciate everything that she's done for me since I've been here. An awesome resource. And, but it's only goodbye for now. We'll see you around. So after that. So anyways, that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? I was asked, and you're the guy, so I was asked by a constituent last week, how often should they pump their septic tank?
Rule of thumb is 3 to 5 years, but it really kind of depends on how much you use it. Because like if someone came to me and they said, well, this is my cottage, I'm over here like, a few weeks, maybe a month out of the year, then you can wait much longer because it's really based on use, right? But for like a full-time use, I would say, if you have a large family, 3 years. But if there's only 2 of you, you could spread that out a little bit longer, like 5 to 6 years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Welcome.
Next, we have written reports. License first. Any questions for Holly? This is about dental clinics north. We're all tired of dental clinics north right now.
Happy to answer.
We did talk at that dental clinics meeting we had about some equipment that the dentists may need. Have you done more research on that? And we're just curious, I'll follow up on that.
Sure, we have had some initial meetings again about it and what those specific things that they wanted in that chunk of money were. And we're in the process. We have a board meeting on Friday that we'll be talking about some of that.
Good. The next written report is Dr. Meyerson. Any questions for Dr. Meyerson?
I do, but just inform us, because I'm not familiar with it. On your numbers here, is this just health department numbers that you see?
These are the clinical fees that are reported to the health department.
They're reported to you through other doctors?
Either typically through labs or doctors. Yes, either way. There's a list of diseases that must be reported to the local health department, either by a provider or by a laboratory.
So if we have people that see people, is that included in these numbers?
Like a provider,
Yes, yes,
they're required to.
they're required, but if they don't call us, we don't know about it, right?
Any other questions? Next is Community Health Director. Bethleen's report. On farm to school. Any questions for Kathleen? Next is Family Health Director Amanda Thompson. Questions on this one? Next is Jeremy Fruit, Environmental Health Director.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
First of all, this handout is very nice. I think it's gonna be very beneficial for the sale of property and all that. I think that's well designed. And then, the other two questions I would have, one, I know this board discussed, recording, sanitary board of appeals decisions to the deeds. And hopefully, we're still moving forward on that, because I think that's gonna be an integral part of. I've been on sanitary board of appeals for a while now too, and you start to see some of these same properties come up because people didn't know at the transfer of the ownership, this had already been appealed once.
Yeah, we've already established that process. We actually have an application now.
Okay.
So hopefully everything's going a little smoother.
And then the second question I have is the current system that, or unless it's changed in the last couple of years, but the current system that's provided for searching for individuals to come in and search septic applications and things of that nature, it's daunting, I guess would be the most polite way to say that in a public meeting. Is there any chance that, I talked to Scott Kazierski before Dan even came along about trying to reorganize those by parcel number, because he said they didn't want to use the parcel number necessarily because the properties get split. But if the properties get split and a new property is created, that new property has a new property number, you only need to know the parent parcel to go backward. But the concern I have is it's hard to find that information on it. And that's in addition to the fact that it hasn't been digitized yet.
Yeah, and actually we've looked into digitizing, and getting some numbers based on that. Right now, we're looking for funding to do that, because that's a daunting task to digitize all those records.
Well, there's services that can be provided for, but I think we have to come to terms with a proper way to search it. Yeah, because addresses change, things change, but parcel numbers and stuff seem to be like more logical way. Right now, they're separated by township, I think, and you gotta go through and find the name of the applicant.
It is cumbersome.
Yeah.
Yeah, either by, you can, and that is the problem with doing it by parcel numbers. If it gets split, then that number goes away and you're dealing with new numbers. I think now that addresses, we've gone through the 911 realignment of addresses and things like that. I think that might even be a better way to do it, or do it both ways, right?
Reference, yeah.
So
if you're not assigning addresses to vacant land, we've already been down that.
Right, yes, exactly, yeah. But I will say, like as Jeremy mentioned, I put together a proposal for every county to digitize environmental health records, hoping that they would want to do that, or could possibly do that with their ARPA funds as a possible, great program that would benefit all the residents and people that work in the real estate, pumping industry, and just homeowners in general. Which I still have those proposals, so I'd love to, bring those to the counties and see if that's something that, I don't know what the status is with the ARPA funds, if it's been spent, if it's already done, or if there's any interest from the counties to maybe potentially fund something like that. But I would definitely, Jeremy and I could come and talk to, the county commissions, separately and really drill down deep in how it would work for each county. And I have that all specified out. They were sent out to the county administrators back, I think, August of 21 is when I sent those. But I know that I just checked, and part of that, there's like 3 phases. So the first phase is getting it digitized through a company that would just basically take our records and digitize it. And then the second part of that is you have to purchase the software to organize and be able to manipulate that information and organize it properly. And then the third part would be getting it accessible to the public online, right? So you could just go to our website, type in an address or parcel ID number, and it pops right up. So
Charge $1.
No,
but I'm saying you could, like register deeds, you're looking for revenue, right?
Right.
I mean, register deeds charges $1 for a criminal copy.
Yeah, I suppose you could.
Antrim County Commission discussed digitizing different deeds at our last meeting. One of the things that the employees said, if the county employees said, if these were digitized, it'd make our job a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
And it would be more friendly to the public. Problem is, it's really expensive, like you just said, But if we have more information in other ways that would be beneficial, I would like to see that proposal again, I guess, personally.
Sure. Yeah, I can send, I can take those proposals that I sent to, and I can send it to each one of you in your respective counties, just so you can see what they look like. But, and I've reported to past boards about this. You probably remember me talking about this in the past, but it would really benefit everybody. You know, it would be a great, for the public, it would create huge efficiencies for our staff to be able to sit at their computer. I mean, even while, and I have experience with this. I did this in Grand Traverse County. I digitized all the records in Grand Traverse County when I was the director there. And I can tell you, I tracked how much time it took for a front office staff person to respond to a records inquiry. And we tracked that for over a year. And it basically, on an average, took about 15 minutes. And that went from about 15 minutes down to about 2 minutes. So it was a huge savings in time, which could be redirected in other areas that, you know, where we need staff to work on other projects. So it's really, there's no downside really, but there is an investment for sure. Probably more information.
No, I think you know, it's an interesting thing, and you know, you talk about a statewide code would lead to you know, some kind of unified. I mean, we have surrounding counties, Cuyahoga being one of them, that has a point of sale requirement that something has to be inspected at a point of sale. If that ends up making it to a statewide thing, you're gonna wish you had all these documents digitized, so we can move quicker on trying to get these things done.
Right, in that phased approach, I mean, we know that it's gonna take time. You know, it's not gonna be like overnight. It's gonna take a couple of years to get it all done. But there's immediate benefits from immediately from the time that you scan those, you have access to that file and can search it, so.
Very good. Any other questions for Dan?
I just have one question, please, for Jeremy.
Yeah. Oh,
I see in this brochure, it says it takes 4 weeks. Is that, are you being,
Conservative.
yes,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
What's the average right now? Because I know I've heard great stuff.
I'd probably, on average, I'd probably say, well, it depends on how building season and stuff is going. But probably right now, I'd probably say a week.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, like in this season. In summer, it probably gets shifted up.
I thought this was great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I have one for each county. That's just, I use Charlotte White as an example.
all right. Are you emailing that to the counties or this just handout?
I can email it to the council.
Because I mean, I just know that
Yeah.
our administrator is good with tech and he could just put it on our website
Oh, that'd be great.
easily, you know what I mean? That's something he's good at, and I don't, other counties have IT people too, so.
Sure.
A lot of people are, they want to permit, they go to the website first rather than
Right,
hand copying, which is kind of the world we live in, you know?
right, exactly.
Let's see, where am I at? James, last one. Any questions on her report? So I was noticing that first block of numbers. If I'm reading that right, the total number of people in Michigan is 10 million, and we have 108,000, so we have, in our health department, we have about 1%, right?
Right.
Okay. That's interesting. All right, committee reports, accounts payable.
So is this where we approve the bills?
This is where,
Okay, I will make a motion that we approve of the bills for $682,030.58. With, the 21,887.77. As the,
I have 22,885.
oh, and change the tax. Okay.
Well, I don't know, I'm just trying to get the right number.
You got the right
It's
number,
20
22.
20.
22.
You wanna make a
Yeah,
motion
this
again, or-
changed. This one.
Sorry.
Yes, I'll make a motion again. I'll make a motion that we approve the bills in the amount of $682,030.77. $30.58, and the February employee expenses of $22,885.88.
Okay. I have a second here, Mr. Mapes. Is there any questions on the bills? I have a couple. AT&T is the first one, phones and cell phones. Does the health department pay for employees to have cell phones or?
Some,
yeah.
Okay.
If it's people that need to be available regularly, like they travel a lot for their job.
It would be client communication, majority of that would be somebody that, either EH or family health, so we're communicating with clients, we don't want everyone text messages these days, so. They have agency cell phones, they're not personal cell phones.
Right. So this $3,000, is that monthly or I'm just rounding?
Oh, the second one?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
AT&T does a monthly, or is that what you're still on?
Well,
Yeah,
The
there's-
cell phones,
It
the
is
cell
cell
phones one, the second one.
The second one down.
I would guess yes,
Okay.
but I could be wrong. Don't quote me.
Because you go down about 10 down, you have, I think it's Anavon Technology Group. It says 4,568 for phones for January and February.
That's why I paused for a moment, because some of those we get billed for a couple months at a time.
So I'm just trying to figure out how this,
If I didn't,
how this phone thing is working.
if I did not delineate like a time frame, then it's probably monthly.
It
Okay,
does say January, February.
Yes.
on this one, but the one up here does
No,
not.
I thought that was.
The Anavon Technology Group is January and February.
So this Anavon Technology, is that cell phones or is that landlines?
It's our internal phone
Is
number.
there?
Oh, landlines, yeah. Yep. So that's different than cell phones.
I'm being texted, they're monthly.
Okay, okay.
I have a great group.
And then go down a little further. Benzie Leelanau District Health Department, 34,000, Sutton Space School Wellness and Local Lead Group Region 2. What's that for?
I can describe the local leadership group region.
Yeah,
to,
there's two programs.
As a funding that we get from the state to lead a local leadership group for all of region 2 when you're talking about different regions in our area. And we're the.
So is a region a health department group?
Nope, so the state has created regions within, so we're region 2, actually FCU counties in region 3, prosperity regions. We don't get to determine that. So, but we're the fiduciary of those funds, however, Benzie Leelanau is the staff person that is leading that group. So we contract with them for those
So they
services.
give us the money and then.
Yes.
Because if you go 3/4 of the way down the page, it's District Health Department number 2 and District Health Department number 3, and that's 8,000 and 60,000 roughly, and that's the same. They contract with us too, is that what you're, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so we're the fiduciary for that program.
Do you remember when we talked about healthy families, Northern Michigan? It's all the time.
That was last month.
Yeah, okay. The third one from the bottom, Emmett Community Health Properties, $13,000 rent.
That's our Emmett offices. It's between Shasta and Harbor Springs.
And that's monthly or? I mean, it's a lot of rent if it's monthly, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
Does that
Well,
include dental clinics?
You've got dental clinics north in there as well. So that,
Which would be how many?
now I didn't break this one out. See, this is where it gets, I can break, I cannot break, but this one, we just went by the 10 year. So we're paying Emmett County Health Properties almost $13,000 for the rent. And that includes rent for HDNW, DCN, and that includes DCN's administrative offices up there.
Have you thought further about, I think you told me something about breaking apart dental clinics north and not.
As far, so,
In the bills. So here
So-
you got one where
right,
maybe half of the rent's going for dental clinics north, so our health department isn't paying for that. Dental clinics north is paying that bill at the end of the day, right?
at the end of the day, we make a transfer that they pay for it.
Right.
We met with the finance committee, and the finance committee wanted to simplify this and not give you a whole stack of paper like we did at the last meeting. I totally agree. I'm on board, efficiency. So we decided to just give you the vendor, the amount, what it pays for. If you want me to break some of these out, like if you want to talk later about what this is or how much is for which, we can talk about that. But I think the finance committee is reviewing these in detail, that lovely packet that we had before.
And I appreciate the simplified form. I'm just wondering if you can do by vendor with DCN and by vendor for health department, if that would be a lot or not. I'm just thinking out loud.
It's gonna take a little more.
I'll keep it in the back burner. I'm not
Let
asking
me
for
toss
it.
that around and
Yeah.
think of how we could
Because there's,
do that. And
I mean, we still got 3.5 pages here, right? So-
right, exactly. You don't want 4, 5, 6.
Right.
Wait, you got a
Jared,
question.
Jared.
Jared.
Mr. Chair, I have just a follow-up question. So the Emmett Community Health Properties,
Mhm.
that's not Emmett County, right? That's the private nonprofit that built the building?
So I think in that building, Emmett County does own it. They own part of that, actually the actual building too. Part of the building reverted back to Emmett County and part of it is
So
still.
it's an addition from the 20 years, from the original
Yes.
20-year
Right.
program?
Yes.
Okay. I'm more familiar with that than I care to tell you.
So,
I'll get Josh up to speed. I'll get Josh up to speed later.
So do all the counties own their buildings now? That the health departments are in?
Not all of them. So typically, so we work through this nonprofit called Northern Health Foundation to build our buildings. And so what they do is they build the buildings. They usually get the county to donate the land, right? And then they set up this structure for the mortgage that once the building is paid for, it reverts back to the county, which happened in Antrim County with the health department building there just last year. So. And
So we own our building.
right.
Emmett owns theirs?
Emmett owns part of it.
Not like part of it.
there was an addition. So
Oh, okay.
Right, so that one's a little bit more complex.
How much?
Gaylord is in Otsego, it's still a Northern Health Foundation, Gaylord, so it hasn't reverted back. Charlevoix reverted back a few years ago, so Charlevoix County owns this building.
Okay, so Gaylord is part of.
Yeah.
Oh, because the addition that's built in the county is still held by Northern.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that's correct, yeah.
Mr. Mason?
Yes, what services are provided by Already counties?
Where are you at, sir?
Up toward the top of the same page, you're down in the county at the bottom, we're talking.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, it's a public service announcement for one of our programs. So we're doing advertising to advertise that we have this service available or that sort. I can't tell you which program it is unless somebody in here knows off the top of their head. I'd have to pull the code and look at which program, but that would be paid for with a grant as well.
So I will say that when they went through all these bills, they had all these information with them. It wasn't like asking questions. They went through obviously.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
And also, what is our connection? Like, maybe use it in other counties too, but like the Chamber of Commerce, we pay dues to the Chamber of Commerce.
We're a member of the Chamber of Commerce, so we get all of their, publications, their emails, their newsletters, so we can be up on what's going on in our communities,
Is that like
just like any other business.
very
would be.
necessary? It's just an extra that.
We learn a lot, to be honest with you, from our local communities and what's going on.
Okay, so my next thing is top of page 2, 26,550 for health department credit cards.
Yep, so we try to run all of our purchasing through a purchasing person, so we can get buying power. If we're buying supplies for multiple buildings, let's buy it all together and get a better rate and discount on it. That person, this has all of it's running through a credit card, HDNW credit card. So you're gonna see a whole bunch of expenses in there because we're paying, like I said, when we did this, we're paying the vendor is First Bank card. This is how much we're paying them. We did break a lot of this out in the finance committee meeting.
And just to follow up, do we have a credit card policy?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes.
I just asked because we're redoing ours in Antrim County right now,
Oh.
and it needed some tweaks and some updates. So that's the only reason I asked. I figured we had one, but
Yes. I think you got a question.
yeah.
There's one and follow up to that, so but you're paying these off every month, no interest charge.
Correct. Yes.
Mhm. And then about halfway down, James Young, legal fees.
Well, that goes back to those legal fees that we talked about.
Well, that's not for that wasn't for the mask mandate stuff. It was, had to do with sanitary board of appeals.
Oh, that's right.
Right, so an
The
image.
reason I brought up, let's see, what is it? It's $2,500 almost. I was just curious because we hired a new attorney.
Right, right. But we had used Jim Young to do the sanitary board of appeals training. And this went back, it was in Rich and Don can speak to this a little bit too. So we had in Emmett County some confusion about the training that we put together. And so there was some questions that came up that we had to basically get Jim back involved and answer some questions for Emmett County specifically. And he actually helped us put together an application that we're using district-wide now for when anybody wants to file an appeal or ask for a variance. We have a unified application that basically asks all the questions and is very clear about what documents are needed to make basically the appeals board members' jobs easier, to go through the process. And so they have all the information. So it doesn't, what we were seeing is that people were going to a sanitary board of appeal and they didn't have all the information. And so what would happen is the appeals board members would be like, well, okay, I guess we'll meet next month. You bring that next piece of information. And it just was a big waste of time, right? So appeals board members were having to reconvene, sometimes 3-4 times to resolve an issue. And so we're just trying to streamline that. And that was part of that. Since he had been so involved with the previous training and everything else that we were doing, we just stuck with him. And I actually called Scott and talked to him about that prior to doing that, because we had made that change with the attorney. So,
Yep, that's good.
yeah.
And that's been emailed or something to all the counties that,
Yes, yeah, Jeremy.
because I got a sanitary board of appeals meeting coming up in a week and a half, so.
We just talked about that actually, because Commissioner LeBanway was asking for that those materials.
Yeah, I need
We
to.
did get them to Antrim County, but we were kind of relying on.
Don't rely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Who's your, who is it, the county clerk? That's who I emailed it to.
Cheryl guy.
Yeah,
Okay.
I emailed it to Cheryl.
I think what we
She
do is
didn't
we just,
email, she didn't email to us yet, but
we'll
Well,
just.
you should have had it before.
I think what we do, especially for your case, is if we give you the materials, you can get it to the other, or if you give us the names of the other Board of Appeals members in Antrim County, we can just,
It's all of our commissioners.
oh, it's
we're
everybody?
down to a 5-member
Oh.
board, so we're all on.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, there's no fighting over that position, right? So.
I brought up at our board meeting that we were gonna do training, and we were waiting to see when it was.
Yeah, so we sent there's a training link and we sent all the materials to the clerk. It is on our website,
Okay.
yes.
So then I.
Don, I sent all that information to Cheryl and I apologize I didn't get to you. And
If you can send it to us, because I really need to study up on this
Yeah.
before our meeting, so.
Yeah, we'll make it easy for you. We'll put it in your inbox so you have it.
Thank you. The next one I had a question on was about 2/3 of the way down. It's McDonald Garver Broadcasting. It's $24,000 radio ads.
Yep.
Do
So,
you know what those?
so we've got those programs that we're doing. When we write grants for these different programs that we're doing, we include in that budget an advertising cost to let the communities know that we have this service available. So that's another one of those charges for advertising. Don't.
Six, about 8 from the bottom. Northern Health Foundation sub Charlevoix, $16,000 rent. Is
Yeah,
that
so
monthly or?
That is,
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
monthly.
That's a
That's a
lot of
demo.
rent for a month.
We're only
That's
charging
East
you
Jordan.
$2,000. I didn't figure out where that was going to.
Yeah, that, I think that's the East Jordan location. Yeah.
All of that, or it's all
You got what, I mean, that's mostly the demo clinic. There's maybe a little bit for, it's anything in Charlotte County. So that's, again, that's going to
of,
that.
anything in Charlotte County that's owned by Northern Health Foundation,
Correct.
which is how many buildings?
Should only be the one there.
Should only be
It's
the
just
one.
that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just the one.
Okay.
Unless
Then
you
yes,
partner with.
That's a lot of rent for one building.
Buildings over. By Charlotte, or by the Keyline. What's that? Yes. but-
I'm wondering if that.
Because remember, they built that down, they. Without going too far into the weeds here, they, to Dan's point, they come in and you donate the land, or you take a facility that already has the land, and then they build an addition to it, and then they amortize it over 20 years. So whatever the construction costs are, that's how they get it back in whatever the health foundation is. So to Dawn's point, the East Jordan Health Center had been there for a number of years, but my recollection has the dental clinic built an addition on the back of it. And if that is the case, then it's probably a 20-year amortization at the 16,200, but I'll be honest, that's the first time I've seen that number. But yeah, that's basically what you're up against there.
Yeah, we have the paperwork for that. As far as like, if you want more information.
That was a good summary. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really good.
That's been going on for a long time. Like Gaylord's they had expanded the basement in Gaylord, which extended the 20-year lease over there, which is kind of how.
Yeah.
That went on.
Right. Yeah, and we went over some of the stuff when we were talking about expanding in Mansalona possibly. And kind of, talking about the whole Northern Health Foundation and how it works. And if we were doing an expansion or addition on the building, then we're basically remortgaging and it's through Northern Health Foundation, because health departments we cannot get financing. We're not allowed to finance things.
Issue a bond.
Yeah, we can issue a bond. So that's why we work with this nonprofit. It's basically why it was developed.
I would be curious how long the lease is on that. 16,000 is a lot every month for how many years?
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
pull it.
Okay.
Echo this in my-
And then the last page, Pitney Bowes, wait, no, I'm on the wrong line. PMP Personnel Services, $1,700 temporary worker services. Is that a usual expense, or I'm just curious
Sorry, I'm not very.
who
good.
we're,
Hold on.
who we're hiring temporary workers for or what?
I think actually we have a PMP employee for the lab.
Yes.
Dental clinics?
For the, no,
It's for the mobile.
it's for the mobile
Oh, yeah.
testing unit out of the Gaylord lab. So we have a public health tech that was hired through PMP instead of being our employee.
And then down a little further, RHC Consulting, $2,783, contract services for internet rebates.
Yes, so there are rebates that we can get because we are a government entity. And to fill out the federal paperwork, like Medicaid, is a nightmare and a headache, and we don't do this regularly. So we hire a consultant company to fill out all of that paperwork for us and to file it. They get a commission, I think it's 10% of anything that we get back in those rebates. It pays for itself multiple times over.
I asked that question.
Yep.
There's a similar process, Jairus, probably for your court system. We hire a company that works with like probate or district, and they go and they find the same things, and then we get rebates back for that, and then they get paid a percentage of what it is. Okay. Yeah.
The second to last one, Wyant Computer Services, $6,500. I'm guessing that's all software.
So we are implementing Office 365. Tim, you could probably take this
Yeah,
one.
their monthly licenses, and 6,000 does include DCN also.
Okay, so that's split between.
Yeah, I think it's close to 4 for the health department, around 2 for the health department.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the questions I asked was, how many components do we have? And I can't remember the question, but what came out of that was, there is no tech plan for buy new and replace new, and some are so old
Oh, yeah.
that would really be helpful. in the
Well, I've been here
So-
8 months, so just a little bit
Yeah.
more with Shannon, and one of my biggest things was creating a refresh plan.
Right,
You know,
it really needs one.
between 3 to 5 years, just continue to recycle those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
So
can
Tim-
say that since Tim has gotten here, he went through and looked at how old all of our computers were, and we did start replacing the oldest ones. And some of them, I think what was the oldest one was like
Some of the Dell clinics, they were 9 and 10 years old.
9 and 10 years old, which is,
Some of the front office.
that's like driving a 50-year-old car. Yeah.
Yeah, I did ask those questions, so I would have thrown this.
Any other questions on the bills? We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Program and Evaluation Committee. We will be meeting Thursday, 10 o'clock, same place. I guess we have work to do. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to let you know too, we're working on the agenda and the bylaws are on there as well. So I'm going to send everybody the electronic versions of the bylaws that I had from other health departments. And then we also have stuff that.
Not every health department.
No, not every health department, no. Just
3 or 4.
Right, right. Yes.
Because we made a motion that, and passed, that every grant would go through the program committee. And we talked about looking at a process. And we never made a motion for that. So I would like to make a motion that we look into a process, working with you and the staff and the program committee on how to approve these grants and how it's going to happen. Because they'll be calling you every day otherwise.
It's good to have a process and policy.
But we didn't do that, so I make the motion that we do that,
Okay.
make that happen. So I need somebody to second it.
Okay, we have a motion. Can you restate it?
I will, I wrote it down. That the director and the staff look into a process, working with the program committee on how to approve the grant process. Because we did talk about that.
That was for non-mandated.
Right, well, whatever they decide, I'm not on that committee, whatever you decide. I think it needs to be looked at because that was not in the motion that we approved of.
Okay, further discussion? I mean, do we have, what's the process now? I mean,
Basically, the process is that if somebody wants to apply for a grant, we talk about it at the leadership team and decide whether to go forward or not. So there's no formal process. So I think that's what needs to be developed.
right,
You know, like we discussed earlier.
Okay.
So,
so you would like the program and evaluation committee to work on a formal process with the health department staff? Yep. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next on the agenda, public comment. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Is ready?
Yeah.
All right, so these 3 minutes aren't going to be quite as organized, but I just have a couple of quick comments. First, I want to see if you guys all did your homework that I gave you last month, and you read the book by Ed Dowd that's called Cause Unknown. Anybody? Just to remind you, Ed Dowd is a Wall Street guy. He made about $12 billion over 10 years for BlackRock, reading data. And he is the guy who's been looking very closely at excess mortality and disability numbers from insurance companies and correlating those to the vaccine rollout. I'm not going to summarize his book. It doesn't take very long to go through it. I hope that you all do. I will just say that his data presentation in that book is very solid and persuasive. And in my humble opinion, it should have by now led this country to follow Denmark, Norway, the UK, and Australia in limiting COVID vaccines to the over 50 or over 65 demographic, if that. Okay, so Ed Dowd, the author of that book, tweeted updated information just a week ago. He is staying on top of the Society of Actuaries and they released excess death data for the fourth quarter of 2022. In December, there was a 43% over baseline in excess death, 43% increase over baseline in excess deaths for the age group 0 to 45. And there was a 35% increase in excess deaths for the age group 45 to 64. That's just in December. He said that he's heard they expect those excess deaths to go up in January and February. Their actual report's going to come out in May, like an official report from the Society of Actuaries. Okay, also, what else is interesting that you reported is that an unknown cause of death, so where they don't give you a cause, has gone up over the years. In 2020, it was 9%. In 2021, it was 10%. And in 2022, it was 30% of deaths being reported are with cause unknown. All right. Then I just wanted to read to you from another guy that's looking at insurance data. And forgive me for reading, but that's what I'm going to do. This weekend, the Epoch Times interviewed insurance analyst Josh Sterling on its long-form video program, American Thought Leaders. That's the Epoch Times program. Sterling described his analysis of mortality data by geographic area, in which he found a distinct statistical correlation between rates of vaccine uptake and excess deaths. He said the data showed a 7% increase in risk of death for each shot taken, so that a person who took 5 shots would have a plus 35% risk of dying compared to an unvaccinated person. Keep your eyes on the data. This is data, honestly, our public health people should be giving us, but we're relying now on insurance people and Wall Street people. A couple more quick things. As a lawyer, as a former lawyer, I can tell you that Court of Appeals brief and argument is going to cost you guys some money. So look into that and see what you're going to spend. Courts are massively used for legislation these days. You just can't get around it. Everybody's legislating from the bench. I had a couple of upstream ideas for you to improve health. I agreed with Henry Mason about the sugar. I also would highly recommend encouraging people to take vitamin D. And last but not least, I liked that environmental handout also very much. All right, thanks everybody.
Other public comment? Seeing none. Commissioner updates. Mr. Turnbull.
Pending some things that are going to be happening over this next month. My wife is having surgery at the end of this month. So I just ask you guys to be flexible with me with our April meeting. Having a couple little kids at home, I might have to stay home and take care of the kids. Seeing how she's doing, because it'll be about 2 weeks after her surgery. I will reach out to you, Mr. Hankins, and either be excused or let them know that I will be coming, but I'll reach out to them. So as a heads up, the wife will be having surgery. Everything's okay. It's a routine, I suppose. I mean, it's routine enough to doing it in Gaylord. That's routine. But that being said, we do have a couple of ones at home, a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old, so she won't be able to hold them. I'll have to do a lot of dad stuff. Let's ask you guys to be flexible with me over the end of this month and into April. That's all. Thank you.
Keep you in prayer. Mr. Mason.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Christensen.
Thank you for indulging me. It's been a number of years since I voluntarily sat to help the health department. So I appreciate your patience, and if anyone ever needs a historical reference point, feel free to contact me. You can find me on Charlotte County's website. So I'm more than happy to talk to you about what I know and the way things used to be. So
Thank you for being here.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Mr. Chamberlain.
Start season for me. Why not return call or something? I'm kind of busy. I don't have good cell phone reception, but.
Don't have good cell coverage out in the woods?
No, not at all. Broadband maybe be a little bit better out there or something, but. Season goes good. Yeah, I'm in Antrim County, Michigan Bush. Yeah. It's cold. Be busy tonight. I'll be done sometime 3 or 4 in the morning. Probably. I'll be there.
I have nothing at this time.
Okay. Mr. Gino.
I have nothing at this time.
Mr. Mapes. I would just mention that I've been doing a little bit of research being on community mental health and also on this board. And I came across an article by Ashley Fagan, PhD. She wrote a whole article on medicine and mental health. And a couple of her highlights were over medicating the body and mind while ignoring the soul creates a vortex of never ending illness. And she details her story about how she got into post-traumatic stress syndrome after the birth of her third child. Very, very interesting article. She says that modern medicine still struggles to explain the relationship between the mental, physical, and spiritual aspects of human beings, and thus often treats body and mind while ignoring the soul. She finally got a counselor and helped her express some of her problems to God. And she says that medication doesn't change or rearrange your thoughts, but it helps treat your mind so your body will not respond in that exaggerated way. So I guess she just kind of presents a holistic view. And sometimes I think what I've seen is that the spiritual is missing in some of our programs. With that, I will call us adjourned at 1:35. Thank you for everyone for coming.
Oh, yeah. That's good.